What if the past isn't silent, but speaking in a language we forgot how to hear? Not through words, but through form. Through precision, repetition, and patterns that refuse to disappear. There are creations that don't just survive time, they seem to ignore it. As if they were never built for a single moment, but for every moment that comes after. And the deeper you look, the stranger it becomes. Because these traces don't feel accidental, and they don't feel complete. They feel paused, like something was started then deliberately left unfinished, waiting, not to be discovered, but to be understood at the right time. And that leaves one question hanging in the air. What if that time is now? The Saimaluu-Tash petroglyphs represent one of the largest and most enigmatic concentrations of ancient rock art anywhere in the world. Located high in the rugged mountains of southwestern Kyrgyzstan, in a remote valley of the Fergana Range at elevations reaching nearly 3,000 meters above sea level, this vast archaeological landscape contains an estimated 90,000 or more petroglyphs carved into thousands of dark basalt boulders scattered across the alpine terrain. These carvings span a remarkably long period of human history, with many scholars dating the earliest images to around the late Bronze Age, approximately 2,000 years before the Common Era, while others were clearly added during the Scythian and Turkic periods more than a millennium later, despite decades of research, beginning with early Soviet archaeological surveys in the 1950s and continuing with more detailed expeditions during the 1970s, 1990s, and early 21st century. The true purpose of Saimaluu-Tash remains uncertain. Its enormous scale, mysterious imagery, and surprisingly advanced carving techniques continue to challenge conventional assumptions about the technological capabilities of ancient pastoral societies in Central Asia. One of the most striking features of Saimaluu-Tash is the sheer density of images. Surveys conducted by Kyrgyz archaeologists such as A.N. Bernstam and later research teams from the Kyrgyz Academy of Sciences revealed that the valley contains more than 10,000 large boulders, many of which display dozens of individual carvings. Some rocks contain layered images from different historical periods, indicating that the location remained culturally significant for centuries. When researchers first attempted to catalogue the carvings during Soviet expeditions in the 1970s, they estimated that documenting every figure in the valley could take decades. Even today, archaeologists continue to identify new carvings during fieldwork seasons, because many stones remain partially buried beneath soil, snow, or vegetation. If we consider that creating even a single petroglyph might require hundreds or thousands of hammer strikes, the cumulative effort behind Saimaluu-Tash becomes astonishing. Producing tens of thousands of images would have required an immense investment of labour, suggesting that the valley may have served as an important ritual or symbolic gathering place for ancient communities, rather than simply a random collection of drawings. Yet the most fascinating and puzzling aspect of Saimaluu-Tash lies in the remarkable precision of its stone carving techniques. Most of the images were created using a method archaeologists call pecking, in which a harder tool repeatedly strikes the rock surface to remove small fragments and gradually form a shape. At first glance, this might sound simple, but close examination reveals a level of craftsmanship that raises serious questions about the tools and methods used by the ancient artists. Many carvings show uniform depths, clean edges, and smoothly curved lines, features that require careful control and repeated deliberate strikes. Some animal figures, particularly the elegant depictions of ibex with long curved horns, display proportions so consistent that they appear almost stylized, suggesting a refined artistic tradition rather than spontaneous scratching. Microscopic analysis of several carvings conducted during modern surveys in the early 2000s indicates that the individual impact marks are often extremely small and closely spaced, implying the use of tools capable of producing controlled, repetitive blows. This level of precision becomes even more impressive when one considers the type of stone involved. Many of the boulders in the Saimaluu-Tash Valley are composed of dense basalt or similarly hard volcanic rock, materials that rank significantly higher in hardness than the limestone surfaces found at many other famous rock art sites. For comparison, petroglyphs in regions such as Valcamonica in Italy or Alta in Norway were often carved into relatively softer metamorphic or sedimentary rocks, which are easier to work using simple stone tools. Basalt, however, requires far greater force to shape. Experimental archaeology has shown that carving even a small figure into basalt using primitive stone hammers can take several hours or even days depending on the complexity of the design. When multiplied across tens of thousands of carvings, the time investment required for Saimaluu-Tash becomes extraordinary. Some researchers therefore speculate that ancient artisans may have used metal tools earlier than previously assumed, possibly made from bronze or iron during later phases of the site's use. However, direct archaeological evidence for such tools within the valley remains limited, leaving the exact technological process unresolved. Archaeological expeditions conducted in 1956, 1975, and again in the early 2000s attempted to analyze the carving patterns in greater detail. During these studies, researchers observed that certain petroglyph panels show consistent spacing between peck marks, sometimes less than a few millimeters apart, which suggests deliberate technique rather than random hammering. In some cases, the carved surfaces appear slightly polished, indicating that the artist may have smoothed the grooves after shaping them. This observation has led to speculation that multiple stages were involved in the carving process, first outlining the design with lighter impacts, then deepening the lines with heavier strikes, and finally refining the edges. Such multi-step craftsmanship implies a surprising level of planning and skill. When compared with many other prehistoric rock art traditions around the world, the Saimaluu-Tash carvings demonstrate a technical consistency more commonly associated with later historical stonework. Another intriguing mystery arises from the longevity and preservation of these carvings. Despite centuries of exposure to harsh alpine weather, including freezing winters, powerful winds, and intense ultraviolet radiation, many of the images remain sharply visible. This is partly due to the formation of a dark mineral coating known as rock patina, which develops naturally on exposed surfaces over long periods. When ancient artists chipped away this outer layer, the fresh stone beneath appeared lighter in colour, creating a strong visual contrast. Over time, the patina slowly reformed within the carved depressions, stabilising them and protecting the shapes from erosion. However, geologists studying weathering rates in high-altitude environments note that erosion should theoretically have softened many of these carvings more dramatically after several thousand years. The fact that numerous petroglyphs still display clear outlines suggests that the original carvings were made deep enough and precisely enough to withstand extreme environmental conditions. The imagery itself adds yet another dimension to the mystery. Among the thousands of figures are depictions of wild animals such as ibex, deer, wolves, and horses, as well as hunting scenes involving archers and mounted riders. Some panels also include geometric shapes, solar symbols, and unusual circular forms that researchers interpret in different ways. Certain carvings resemble radiating discs or wheel-like patterns, leading some scholars to propose that they might represent solar worship or astronomical observations. Others show stylized human figures with exaggerated heads or elaborate headdresses, possibly indicating ritual costumes worn by ancient shamans. because the valley contains layers of carvings from different historical periods. The meaning of these symbols may have evolved over time, making it difficult to interpret them within a single cultural framework. In your opinion, what tools or techniques did ancient artisans use to carve tens of thousands of precise images into the extremely hard basalt stones at Saimaluu-Tash petroglyphs? Where are you watching this video from? And what time of day is it for you? Share your location and time in the comments below. Hidden among the vast sandstone plateaus of the Central Sahara in southeastern Algeria lies one of the most extraordinary archives of prehistoric human expression ever discovered, the rock paintings of Tassili. Spread across an area of roughly 72,000 square kilometers, this rugged landscape contains an estimated 15,000 individual paintings and engravings created by prehistoric communities over a span of nearly 9,000 years, from around 10,000 BCE to roughly 1,000 BCE. First systematically documented during the mid-20th century by the French archaeologist Henri Lot, the site quickly became one of the most important archaeological discoveries in Africa. Yet despite decades of research, the paintings continue to raise profound questions about the technological abilities, socio-environmental knowledge, and artistic sophistication of the ancient people who created them. Among the many mysteries surrounding Tassili, one stands out with particular intrigue: the remarkably advanced pigment technology that allowed these paintings to survive thousands of years in one of the harshest climates on Earth. The Sahara Desert is not a gentle environment for ancient art. Temperatures can exceed 50 degrees Celsius, while powerful sand-laden winds constantly scour exposed rock surfaces. Under such conditions, most pigments applied to stone would fade, flake, or erode within centuries. Yet many Tassili paintings remain astonishingly vivid even after 8 to 10 millennia. Shades of deep red, ochre, yellow, white, and dark brown can still be seen clearly on sheltered rock faces. This durability has puzzled scientists for decades. Chemical analyses conducted by researchers in the late 20th and early 21st centuries reveal that prehistoric artists relied primarily on mineral pigments such as hematite for red tones, manganese oxide for black, and various iron-rich clays for yellow and brown hues. While the use of such minerals was common in prehistoric art around the world, including in sites like Lascaux Cave and Chauvet Cave, the remarkable preservation of Tassili pigments suggests that the artists employed binding techniques far more sophisticated than previously assumed. For pigments to remain attached to stone for thousands of years, mineral powders must be mixed with a binding medium, often called a binder. Without such a substance, pigments simply crumble and wash away. In many prehistoric cave paintings in Europe, researchers believe animal fat or water may have been used. However, laboratory studies of Tassili samples have suggested the possible presence of complex organic binders, potentially derived from plant resins, tree sap, egg proteins, or animal oils. Some microscopic analyses indicate that pigments were sometimes applied in multiple layers, a technique similar to glazing methods used in later historical painting traditions. In certain figures, archaeologists have observed subtle shading effects created by layering different pigment densities, producing a sense of volume and movement rarely seen in prehistoric art. This raises an extraordinary possibility. The artists of Tassili may have possessed an empirical understanding of pigment chemistry that allowed them to create mixtures capable of resisting extreme environmental degradation. Comparisons with other prehistoric sites highlight just how unusual this durability is. In many open-air rock art locations around the world, such as the petroglyph fields of Valcamonica, painted surfaces have largely disappeared, leaving behind only engravings carved into stone. Even in protected cave environments, pigments often fade dramatically after a few thousand years. By contrast, Tassili's paintings, despite being exposed to desert air for millennia, often retain remarkable clarity. Some anthropomorphic figures and animal depictions still show crisp outlines and dense coloration, suggesting that the original mixtures bonded strongly with the sandstone surface. Scientists have proposed that the region's geology may also play a role. The porous structure of the sandstone could allow pigments to penetrate microscopic cavities, effectively anchoring them into the rock itself. However, this alone cannot explain the consistent vibrancy observed across thousands of paintings. The mystery deepens when considering the scale and diversity of artistic production at Tassili. The paintings represent several distinct cultural phases, including the so-called Round Head period, dating roughly between 8000 and 6000 BCE. During this era, artists created enormous figures with rounded helmet-like heads and elongated bodies, some reaching heights of over 5 meters. Many of these figures appear suspended or floating, surrounded by smaller human forms engaged in ritual-like scenes. The pigments used in these paintings are often especially rich and well-preserved, implying that the artists of this period may have mastered particularly effective pigment mixtures. Later pastoral phases depict cattle herding scenes, wildlife such as giraffes and elephants, and complex community activities, all rendered with similar colour stability. Archaeological expeditions conducted since the 1950s have repeatedly attempted to replicate these ancient pigment formulas. Experimental archaeologists have recreated mixtures using local minerals combined with various organic substances such as gum arabic, animal marrow and plant oils. While some mixtures produce reasonably durable paints, none have perfectly replicated the long-term stability observed in the Tassili originals. This has led some researchers to suspect that ancient artists may have employed carefully refined combinations of minerals and organic binders, possibly processed through heating, grinding, or fermentation techniques that are no longer fully understood. Another striking aspect of the pigment technology is the apparent consistency across vast distances. Paintings scattered across hundreds of kilometers often display nearly identical colour palettes and application techniques. This suggests that knowledge of pigment preparation may have been shared across large prehistoric communities, perhaps transmitted through generations of artisans or ritual specialists. If true, Tassili nature may represent not merely isolated artistic expression, but the remnants of a sophisticated cultural tradition with its own technological knowledge base. Beyond the technical mysteries of the pigments themselves, the paintings also preserve crucial evidence about the prehistoric Sahara. Many scenes depict animals such as hippopotamuses, crocodiles, antelope and giraffes, species that cannot survive in today's hyper-arid desert. These images confirm that during the early Holocene period, the Sahara was once a lush savanna landscape with rivers and lakes, often referred to by scientists as the Green Sahara phase. In this environment, human populations flourished, leaving behind the vast artistic archive now preserved on Tassili's sandstone walls. Despite decades of research, the exact techniques used by the prehistoric artists of Tassili Naja remain unclear. Their pigments have survived for thousands of years in harsh desert conditions, far longer than most mineral paints in open environments. Questions about the pigments, binders, and painting methods still puzzle scientists. These paintings suggest that prehistoric technological knowledge may have been far more advanced than we once believed. What do you think was the secret behind the incredibly durable pigments used in the Tassili Naja rock paintings? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the dense coastal jungle of northern Belize, near the waters of Chetumal Bay, the ancient Maya city of Cerros archaeological site holds one of the most visually striking and technologically puzzling artistic traditions of the pre-classic Maya world, the colossal Cerros pyramid masks. These enormous sculpted faces attached directly to the sides of stepped pyramids, were constructed more than 2,000 years ago, most of them dating between roughly 400 BCE and 100 BCE. At first glance, they appear to be monumental religious decorations, possibly representing solar deities or mythological beings tied to Maya cosmology. Yet closer examination reveals something far more intriguing. The masks are not carved from solid stone like the monumental sculptures of later Maya cities. Instead, they were carefully formed from stucco, a lime-based plaster mixture applied over stone cores, and despite being composed of what should be a relatively fragile material exposed to tropical rain, humidity and erosion for over 2 millennia, many of these masks still retain remarkable structural integrity and visible detail. This unexpected durability has become one of the most fascinating technological mysteries surrounding the site. The masks themselves are enormous. Individual examples discovered on the pyramid known as Structure 5 C-second measure, roughly 2 to 3 meters high and up to 4 meters wide, forming symmetrical pairs along the stairways of the pyramid. Each mask displays elaborate iconography, curling fangs, stylized eyes, complex headdresses, and geometric ornamentation that likely symbolized aspects of Maya mythology or the daily journey of the sun. Archaeologists working at Cerros during excavations in the 1970s and 1980s, particularly under the direction of researchers such as David Friedel, documented several of these masks while investigating the pyramid's multiple construction phases. Their discoveries showed that the pyramid had been rebuilt repeatedly, with newer layers covering older structures, effectively sealing earlier masks inside the pyramid. This practice, common in Maya architecture, means that some masks remain buried within the structure even today, preserved but largely inaccessible to direct study. What makes these masks particularly extraordinary is the material technology used to create them. Maya stucco was produced by burning limestone to create quicklime, which was then mixed with water and aggregates to produce a workable plaster. Modern experiments suggest that producing lime requires temperatures of approximately 800 to 900 degrees Celsius, a level of heat that demands sustained, controlled firing. For a civilization working without metal furnaces or industrial kilns, generating such temperatures in large quantities would have required carefully designed firing pits or kilns and significant amounts of fuel. Estimates suggest that producing enough stucco to coat a large pyramid facade could have required hundreds of tons of limestone and thousands of kilograms of wood fuel. Considering that Cerros was not an enormous metropolis, its population during the pre-classic period may have been only 1,000 to 2,000 inhabitants. The scale of resource management and labour organisation implied by these stucco constructions raises major questions about the social and technological capabilities of the community. The durability of the Cerros stucco is especially puzzling when compared to other ancient plaster traditions. In many tropical archaeological sites, lime plaster erodes rapidly once exposed to rain and humidity. Yet at Cerros, certain masks have survived with crisp edges and recognisable facial features after more than 2,000 years. By contrast, many stucco surfaces in other Maya cities such as Tikal or Palenque often deteriorated more severely when exposed. Even where stucco masks exist elsewhere, such as at Huazactun, they are usually smaller or more fragmentary. The examples at Cerros remain unusually large and comparatively well preserved. Some researchers have suggested that the Maya may have used multiple layers of plaster, each carefully smoothed and dried before the next was applied, creating a dense composite material. Others propose that organic additives, possibly plant resins, fibres or ash, may have been mixed into the plaster to improve cohesion and resistance to cracking. However, chemical analyses of surviving fragments have not yet produced a definitive explanation for the mask's remarkable resilience. Another intriguing possibility lies in the firing and preparation of the lime itself. If the limestone used at Cerros was burned at slightly higher temperatures or for longer durations than typical Maya lime production, it might have produced a stronger, more reactive quicklime. Once mixed with water and carbon dioxide from the air, the lime would gradually recrystallize into calcium carbonate, effectively turning the plaster back into a stone-like substance. Over centuries, this process could have strengthened the material further, yet producing lime at such controlled conditions would require a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of combustion, fuel management and material behavior, knowledge that is difficult to reconstruct from the archaeological record alone. Excavations have also revealed that the masks were not simple flat surfaces, but complex sculptural forms built over stone frameworks. The artisans first constructed the underlying structure from shaped stones, then applied thick stucco layers, sometimes 10 to 20 centimeters thick, which were carved and smoothed while still wet. This allowed sculptors to create dramatic facial expressions and deeply recessed features. In some cases, traces of pigment indicate that the masks were once brightly painted, possibly in reds, yellows and blues derived from mineral and organic pigments. Imagine the visual impact. Towering pyramids covered with vividly coloured deity faces glowing under the tropical sun. The result would have been an architectural spectacle designed to inspire awe among visitors and pilgrims arriving by sea through Chetumal Bay, yet the technological puzzle remains. How did a relatively small coastal community manage to produce such massive quantities of lime plaster? How did they coordinate the labour required to quarry limestone, burn it, transport materials and sculpt enormous masks across multiple construction phases? And perhaps most puzzling of all, how did their stucco achieve such long-term durability in an environment that normally destroys plaster within centuries? Modern conservation scientists studying Maya stucco continue to investigate these questions using microscopic analysis and chemical testing. While progress has been made, no single theory yet explains why the Cerros masks have endured so well. Today, the Cerros pyramid masks remain a testament to the remarkable engineering skills of the ancient Maya. Despite decades of research, the secret that allowed these massive stucco masks to survive for more than 2,000 years is still not fully understood. Deep in the jungles of Belize, they continue to gaze outward from the pyramids, silent traces of a lost ancient technology. What do you think allowed the massive stucco masks at Cerros Archaeological Site to survive for more than 2,000 years in such a harsh tropical environment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Deep beneath the massive stone structures of the Dendera temple complex in Upper Egypt lies one of the most debated carvings in the entire history of ancient archaeology, the enigmatic relief commonly known as the Dendera Light. Hidden within narrow subterranean crypts built during the late Ptolemaic period, roughly between the 1st century BCE and the early Roman era, these carvings depict a strange scene that has fascinated historians, engineers, and alternative researchers for decades. The relief shows a long oval structure resembling a large glass bulb, inside of which a serpent stretches forward from a lotus-like base. Behind the object stands a pillar known as the Djed, a symbol traditionally associated with stability and the god Osiris. While Egyptologists interpret this imagery as part of a mythological scene involving the birth of the serpent god Harsomtus from the primordial lotus, the visual resemblance of the object to a modern electric light bulb has led many observers to wonder whether the ancient artists were depicting something far more technological than symbolic. Although mainstream archaeology rejects the idea that the Egyptians possessed electricity, the image itself continues to provoke questions about how ancient craftsmen conceptualized light, illumination, and the environments in which these carvings were created. The most intriguing aspect of the Dendera relief is not merely its unusual shape, but the context in which it appears. The carvings are located in a series of tight underground chambers carved into the temple's thick sandstone foundations. These crypts are extremely narrow, some corridors measure less than 1 metre wide, and are situated several metres below the temple floor. According to archaeological surveys conducted by French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette in the 19th century, and later detailed studies by teams working with the Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale, the chambers were likely used to store sacred ritual objects associated with the cult of Hathor. However, the presence of detailed reliefs in such confined spaces raises a practical question that has puzzled researchers for over a century. How were these carvings illuminated while they were being created? This question touches on one of the most persistent mysteries in Egyptology, the broader problem of lighting in ancient temples and tombs. Many of Egypt's most elaborately decorated structures, including the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, extend deep underground, far beyond the reach of natural sunlight. Some burial corridors descend more than 30 metres below the surface, yet their walls are covered with intricate painted scenes executed with extraordinary precision. If the artist relied solely on torches or oil lamps, one would expect to find heavy deposits of soot on ceilings and walls. Yet numerous surveys have reported that such soot deposits are surprisingly rare or minimal. In several tombs studied during conservation campaigns in the 20th century, including those of Ramses IV and Seti I, scientists observed that the ceilings above detailed paintings were remarkably clean, suggesting that large open flames were not used extensively during the painting process. Various explanations have been proposed over the decades to resolve this puzzle. One widely accepted theory is that ancient Egyptian workers used oil lamps fueled by animal fat or plant oils, designed with carefully trimmed wicks that produced minimal smoke. Experimental archaeology has shown that such lamps can indeed burn relatively cleanly, especially when placed in small niches or shielded containers. Another hypothesis suggests that the Egyptians used reflective mirror systems to direct sunlight into underground chambers. According to this idea, polished copper mirrors could theoretically reflect beams of sunlight down corridors and into deeper spaces. However, modern experiments attempting to replicate such systems have demonstrated that the intensity of reflected sunlight decreases rapidly with each reflection. Even with highly polished metal mirrors, it becomes extremely difficult to illuminate spaces more than a few meters from the entrance. This is where the imagery of the Dendera light becomes especially intriguing. Some researchers argue that the relief might symbolically represent a controlled source of illumination, perhaps inspired by ritual or mythological concepts related to divine light. The elongated oval shape enclosing the serpent resembles the form of a bulb or glass tube, while the lotus base appears to support the emerging serpent as if it were a conduit or filament. The jed pillar behind the structure could be interpreted as a stabilizing element, visually similar to an insulator or support column in modern electrical imagery. While these comparisons are largely speculative, the resemblance has fueled decades of debate in both academic and popular discussions about ancient technology. Archaeological investigations into the Dendera crypts themselves provide additional context for the debate. During detailed documentation campaigns in the late 20th century, researchers carefully mapped the dimensions of the crypt corridors and recorded the reliefs using high-resolution photography and laser scanning. These studies confirmed that the carvings were executed with remarkable precision despite the cramped working conditions. The relief lines are deep and consistent, suggesting that artisans worked methodically with copper or bronze chisels. The sandstone surface shows little evidence of rushed or uneven carving, implying that the artists had sufficient visibility to maintain fine control over their tools. This observation once again raises the practical issue of lighting. Producing such detailed reliefs would have required a stable and reliable source of illumination over extended periods of time. Comparisons with other ancient cultures highlight the uniqueness of this challenge. In many Mediterranean civilizations, decorative art was primarily executed in open courtyards or well-lit interior halls. Even Roman underground catacombs, though extensive, typically feature simpler carvings and paintings executed in areas accessible with small lamps. Egyptian temples, by contrast, often include long, subterranean chambers filled with highly detailed imagery, suggesting a sophisticated approach to managing interior lighting conditions. The Dendera crypts represent an extreme example of this architectural tradition. Despite the many theories proposed, no direct archaeological evidence has been discovered that proves the existence of electrical lighting in ancient Egypt. No wires, glass bulbs, or generators have ever been found in temple excavations. For this reason, the vast majority of Egyptologists interpret the Dendera light relief strictly as religious symbolism, depicting the cosmic birth of divine energy emerging from the primordial waters of creation. According to this interpretation, the serpent represents Harsomptus, the lotus symbolizes rebirth, and the enclosing oval shape represents the protective womb of the universe. The imagery therefore expresses theological concepts rather than technological ones. Even with scholarly explanations, the Dendera light continues to fascinate researchers and visitors. Its unusual imagery, hidden location in underground crypts, and the unresolved question of how ancient artists illuminated their workspace keep it among the most discussed carvings in Egypt. More than 2,000 years later, it still challenges what we think we know about the knowledge and capabilities of the ancient Egyptian world. Why do you think the intricate carvings in the dark underground crypts of Dendera show almost no traces of soot? How might the ancient Egyptians have illuminated these spaces? Share your theory in the comments below. In the wetlands of eastern India, about 35 kilometers northeast of modern Kolkata, lies the ancient archaeological site of Chandraketugarh, a place that has quietly produced some of the most intriguing artifacts of early South Asian civilization. Among its most remarkable discoveries are the Chandraketugarh terracotta plaques, small but astonishingly detailed reliefs made of fired clay that date roughly from the 3rd century BCE to the 2nd century CE. At first glance, these plaques appear to be simple decorative objects, figures of elegantly dressed women, mythological beings, musicians, animals, and geometric motifs carefully moulded into thin panels of terracotta. Yet the deeper archaeologists study them, the more puzzling they become. Their extraordinary artistic precision, the mysterious cultural symbolism they depict, and especially the unexpected durability of their fired clay technology, raise questions that modern researchers have not fully answered. Despite being made from one of the most fragile materials used in ancient art, many of these plaques have survived more than 2,000 years in the humid climate of Bengal, a region known for monsoon rains, flooding rivers, and soil conditions that usually destroy delicate archaeological remains. The site itself first attracted scholarly attention during the 19th century, when local villagers began uncovering terracotta objects while digging ponds or cultivating fields. British antiquarians such as Rakaldas Banerjee and later Indian archaeologists recognized that these artifacts were not isolated curiosities, but evidence of a large and sophisticated ancient settlement. Systematic excavations conducted intermittently during the 1950s, 1960s and later decades revealed layers of occupation, suggesting that Chandraketugarh had once been an important urban and trade centre, connected to wider networks of the Ganges Delta and the Bay of Bengal. Archaeologists recovered pottery, beads, coins, seals, and hundreds of terracotta figurines and plaques. Yet among all these finds, the plaques stand apart because of their unusually refined craftsmanship. Many measure only 10 to 20 centimeters in height, but they display intricate jewelry patterns, elaborate hairstyles, and textile designs that would challenge even modern ceramic artisans working with magnification tools. Researchers believe that many plaques were produced using mold technology, allowing artisans to replicate complex images quickly. However, close examination shows that the pieces were not purely mass-produced. Subtle variations in facial features, ornamentation, and finishing marks suggest that after the clay was pressed into molds, craftsmen often refined the surface manually using fine tools. This hybrid process, combining standardized molds with individual artistic adjustments, indicates a surprisingly advanced production system. Some scholars compare it to the terracotta workshops of the Mauryan and Shunga periods, while others note similarities with the molded relief panels from sites such as Tassili in present-day Pakistan. Yet the Chandraketugarh examples frequently surpass these parallels in complexity, especially in the layered details of jewellery and symbolic motifs. The figures often appear almost sculptural, emerging from the clay with a depth and clarity rarely seen in small terracotta works of that era. Still, the most remarkable mystery surrounding these plaques lies not in their imagery, but in their technological endurance. Terracotta, by definition, is clay hardened by firing in a kiln, but its durability depends heavily on the firing temperature, the composition of the clay mixture, and the cooling process. In many ancient cultures, poorly fired terracotta can crumble within centuries, particularly in wet climates. Bengal's environment should have been especially destructive. Average annual rainfall exceeds 1,500 millimeters, and seasonal flooding regularly saturates the soil. Under such conditions, unfired or low-fired clay would dissolve or disintegrate over time, yet hundreds of Chandraketugarh plaques remain intact, their surfaces still preserving delicate lines carved more than 2 millennia ago. This survival suggests that the artisans who produced them possessed a sophisticated understanding of ceramic firing techniques, possibly achieving temperatures between 800 and 1000 degrees Celsius, which is sufficient to transform clay minerals into a harder, more stable structure. Archaeological analyses of terracotta fragments from the site indicate that the clay was likely mixed with fine sand or organic tempering materials before firing. Such additives reduce cracking and increase mechanical strength once the object is baked. However, the exact formula used by Chandraketugarh craftsmen remains uncertain. Some plaques show evidence of a thin slip or surface treatment that may have sealed microscopic pores in the clay, helping the objects resist moisture. If this interpretation is correct, it would imply a surprisingly controlled manufacturing process, possibly involving specialized kilns capable of maintaining stable heat levels. Unfortunately, definitive kiln structures from the same production context have not yet been identified in excavations, leaving archaeologists with indirect clues rather than complete technical evidence. When compared with terracotta traditions from other ancient civilizations, the durability of the Chandraketugarh plaques becomes even more striking. In Mesopotamia, for example, many clay reliefs from the 1st millennium BCE survived only because they were preserved in dry desert conditions. Similarly, Greek terracotta figurines from Tanagra often required protective burial environments to remain intact. Chandraketugarh, by contrast, existed in a humid delta landscape where organic decay and soil acidity typically destroy fragile materials. The survival of these plaques therefore implies that their firing process produced an unusually resilient ceramic matrix. Some researchers speculate that ancient potters may have used multi-stage firing, gradually increasing temperature to reduce internal stress within the clay. Others suggest that the mineral composition of the local Ganges Delta clay, rich in iron oxides and fine silts, may have contributed to the plaque's strength when properly fired. Excavations conducted by the Archaeological Survey of India in the 20th century uncovered large concentrations of terracotta artifacts in habitation layers associated with urban activity, suggesting that these plaques were not rare luxury objects, but possibly part of a broader cultural or religious practice. Some plaques may have decorated household shrines, while others could have been attached to architectural structures or used in ritual contexts. Yet the exact purpose remains debated. Certain images depict female figures wearing elaborate ornaments and standing in graceful poses reminiscent of later Hindu iconography. But the chronology predates many classical religious traditions in their fully developed forms. Other plaques portray animals, mythical hybrids, or symbolic motifs whose meaning is still uncertain. These ambiguous themes add another layer of mystery. They hint at belief systems or artistic conventions that are only partially preserved in surviving texts. Today, many Chandraketugarh plaques are displayed in museums in Kolkata, New Delhi, and abroad, where scholars continue to analyse them using modern techniques such as microscopic surface analysis, thermoluminescence dating, and compositional spectroscopy. These studies confirm their antiquity and reveal traces of manufacturing methods, yet they have not fully solved the technological puzzle of their resilience. The plaques remain a reminder that ancient artisans were not merely craftsmen working with simple tools. They were experimenters who understood materials through generations of practical knowledge. Their kilns, mixtures, and firing cycles may have been refined through centuries of trial and error, eventually producing ceramics capable of surviving thousands of years. The Chandraketugarh terracotta plaques are more than decorative relics. They reveal advanced ancient ceramic knowledge. Their survival in Bengal's humid climate still puzzles archaeologists. How did artisans over 2,000 years ago create a firing technique strong enough for these plaques to last for millennia? The answer remains one of the enduring mysteries of the ancient world. How do you think the ancient artisans of Chandraketugarh managed to develop a firing technique strong enough for these terracotta plaques to survive more than 2,000 years in Bengal's humid climate? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The San Bartolo murals are widely considered one of the most astonishing artistic and technological discoveries associated with the ancient Maya civilization. Hidden for more than 2 millennia inside a pyramid structure deep in the tropical forests of northern Guatemala, these murals offer a rare glimpse into the intellectual, artistic and technological sophistication of the Maya during the late pre-classic period. Their discovery in 2001 by a research team led by the archaeologist William Saturno dramatically changed scholarly understanding of early Maya culture. Before this discovery, many researchers believed that complex Maya mythology, writing systems, and elaborate artistic traditions did not fully develop until the Classic period, roughly after 250 CE. However, the San Bartolo murals, radiocarbon dated to approximately 100 BCE to 100 CE, demonstrated that highly advanced artistic and symbolic traditions already existed centuries earlier. The murals were discovered inside a small chamber, within a pyramid structure known as Las Pinturas. Ironically, the discovery occurred only because looters had previously tunneled into the structure in search of artifacts. While investigating the damage caused by these illegal excavations, Saturno noticed fragments of painted plaster on the tunnel walls. Subsequent archaeological excavations revealed entire sections of brilliantly preserved mural paintings covering the interior walls of the chamber. These paintings extend across several meters of wall space and depict complex mythological scenes involving Maya gods, ritual offerings, and cosmological symbolism. The artistic style is strikingly sophisticated. Figures are rendered with dynamic movement, carefully proportioned anatomy, and intricate decorative elements, suggesting that the artists responsible for the murals possessed highly developed technical skills and possibly specialised artistic training. Some individual brushstrokes measure only a few millimetres in width, indicating the use of extremely fine painting tools. However, among the many remarkable aspects of the San Bartolo murals, one feature stands out as particularly mysterious to modern researchers: the extraordinary durability of their pigments. Despite being more than 2,000 years old and located in a humid tropical environment that typically destroys organic materials rapidly, many of the mural colours remain vivid and recognisable. This durability is especially evident in the pigments used to produce red, yellow, black, white, and the famous Maya blue, a pigment that has fascinated chemists and archaeologists for decades. The reds were typically derived from hematite-based iron oxides, while yellows often came from ochre minerals. Black pigments were likely produced from carbon-based materials such as charcoal or soot, and white was created from finely processed lime plaster. Yet it is the blue pigment that has generated the most scientific intrigue. Maya blue is widely regarded as one of the most chemically stable pigments ever developed by any ancient civilization. Modern laboratory experiments have shown that it is remarkably resistant to acids, solvents, heat, humidity, and biological degradation. In some controlled tests, samples of Maya blue remain stable even after exposure to nitric acid and temperatures exceeding 150 degrees Celsius. This level of chemical stability is extraordinary, especially considering that the pigment was developed long before the emergence of modern chemistry. The pigment itself is produced through a combination of indigo dye, derived from plant sources, and a rare clay mineral known as palygorskite. When heated together under specific conditions, the indigo molecules become trapped within the microscopic channels of the clay structure, forming a hybrid pigment with exceptional durability. What remains mysterious, however, is how ancient Maya artisans discovered and perfected this process. Replicating Maya blue in modern laboratories has shown that the mixture must typically be heated to temperatures ranging between approximately 150 and 200 degrees Celsius in order to stabilize the pigment structure. Achieving and controlling such temperatures would normally require specialized kilns or carefully managed heating systems. Yet there is still limited archaeological evidence that the Maya possessed industrial-style furnaces designed specifically for pigment production during the late Preclassic period. Some researchers speculate that the pigment may have been accidentally discovered during ritual incense burning, in which indigo-dyed textiles or plant materials were heated together with palygorskite clay. Others suggest that the Maya may have deliberately experimented with heating mixtures in ceramic vessels. Despite numerous chemical studies conducted since the 1960s, the exact method used by ancient artisans to produce large quantities of stable Maya blue remains uncertain. The San Bartolo murals provide some of the earliest surviving examples of this pigment in use. Chemical analysis of pigment samples taken from the murals has confirmed the presence of palygorskite-based Maya blue, indicating that the technology was already well developed by the late Preclassic period. This discovery significantly pushed back the known history of Maya blue production by several centuries. Prior to the San Bartolo excavations, the pigment was most famously associated with later Maya sites, such as Chichen Itza, where it was used in ritual contexts including sacrificial ceremonies at the sacred cenote. The presence of the pigment at San Bartolo demonstrates that this sophisticated chemical technology was already in use long before the rise of major Classic period Maya cities. Beyond the pigments themselves, the techniques used to apply them also remain a subject of ongoing research. The murals were painted onto carefully prepared layers of lime plaster that had been smoothed to a near-polished surface. This preparation resembles fresco techniques later used in Mediterranean cultures, though the Maya method appears to have developed independently. In some areas of the murals, multiple layers of pigment were applied to achieve shading and depth, suggesting that the artist possessed an advanced understanding of colour layering and visual composition. The careful preparation of the plaster base may have also contributed to the remarkable preservation of the paintings. Another fascinating aspect of the murals is their narrative complexity. Rather than isolated decorative images, the paintings form an integrated visual story that appears to represent elements of early Maya creation mythology. Scenes depict maize gods, ritual blood offerings, sacred trees, and royal figures performing ceremonial acts. Some scholars believe the murals represent one of the earliest visual depictions of the Maya creation narrative, later recorded in the Popol Vuh, though interpretations remain debated. The organisation of the scenes across the walls suggests careful planning, possibly following symbolic cosmological directions associated with Maya religious beliefs. Archaeological research at San Bartolo has continued for more than 2 decades, with excavations revealing additional structures, murals, and artifacts that help contextualize the site within the broader development of Maya civilization. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials from the pyramid construction layers has consistently confirmed the late preclassic chronology of the murals. Excavations have also shown that the pyramid containing the murals was intentionally buried beneath later construction phases, a common practice in Maya architecture in which new buildings were constructed directly on top of older ones. This practice may have inadvertently protected the murals from environmental exposure for centuries, as despite decades of research, many questions remain unresolved. How did the ancient Maya discover the chemical process needed to create Maya blue? What tools allowed artists to produce such precise lines and delicate details? And what deeper meanings are hidden within the mythological scenes on the walls? The San Bartolo murals remain not only a remarkable work of ancient art, but also a reminder that the technological knowledge of early civilizations may have been far more advanced and mysterious than we once believed. How do you think the ancient Maya discovered the technology to create the incredibly durable Maya blue pigment? Was it the result of advanced scientific knowledge, generations of experimentation, or simply an accidental discovery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden deep within the ancient Maya city of the Temple of the Inscriptions lies one of the most discussed artifacts in the study of ancient civilizations. The monumental stone lid known today as the Palenque astronaut relief. This extraordinary carving seals the sarcophagus of the Maya ruler Kinich Janab Pakal, whose tomb was discovered in 1952 by Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruz-Luillier. When Ruz first ascended a long staircase buried beneath centuries of debris inside the pyramid, he uncovered something no one expected: a sealed burial chamber containing a massive limestone sarcophagus covered by a single stone lid, carved with one of the most intricate relief compositions ever produced in the ancient Americas. Measuring approximately 3.8 meters long and 2.2 meters wide, and weighing an estimated 5 to 6 tons, the slab is not merely a funerary lid, but a masterpiece of engineering, logistics, and symbolic design. While the imagery has generated endless speculation, including comparisons to a modern astronaut seated inside a machine, the most remarkable mystery may not be the iconography itself, but rather how such a colossal stone object was quarried, transported, carved, and installed deep inside a pyramid more than 13 centuries ago. The first challenge begins with the stone itself. The lid was carved from a single block of fine limestone, a material commonly used throughout the Maya region, but rarely manipulated at such a massive scale with this level of precision. Even archaeological analysis suggests the stone likely came from quarries located several kilometers from the ceremonial center of Palenque. Even today, moving a multi-ton block of limestone across uneven jungle terrain, Without metal tools, wheeled vehicles or draft animals would be a complex engineering task. Yet the ancient Maya accomplished this centuries before modern mechanical equipment existed. Researchers studying Maya construction techniques estimate that moving a 5-ton stone slab could have required dozens of workers using wooden rollers, rope systems made from plant fibres, and carefully levelled earthen ramps. Similar transportation strategies have been proposed for the movement of stones at other ancient sites such as Stonehenge and the temples of Angkor Wat, yet the logistical constraints at Palenque are arguably even more challenging because the object ultimately had to be lowered into a confined subterranean chamber inside a pyramid rather than placed in an open architectural space. What makes the situation even more puzzling is the architecture of the pyramid itself. The burial chamber containing Pakal's sarcophagus sits roughly 25 meters above the ground level of the surrounding plaza, yet it is enclosed within the structure of the temple. This means the enormous stone lid could not have been carried into the chamber after the pyramid was fully completed. Archaeologists therefore believe the sarcophagus and its lid were installed during an early stage of construction, after which the pyramid was gradually built around the tomb. Evidence supporting this theory comes from the internal staircase discovered by Roos-le-Willier, which had been intentionally filled with rubble and sealed after the burial ceremony. The staircase suggests that workers needed a temporary access route to transport materials into the chamber before the structure was finalised. Even with such access, however, manoeuvring a multi-ton stone slab through narrow corridors and lowering it precisely onto the sarcophagus would have required careful planning and coordination. Comparisons with other ancient construction projects highlight just how remarkable this feat may be. In Egypt, the granite sarcophagi of the Serapeum of Saqqara weigh far more, sometimes over 60 tons, but they were installed in large underground galleries that allowed more space for movement. By contrast, the burial chamber at the Temple of the Inscriptions measures only a few meters across, leaving very little margin for error during installation. Some researchers propose that the Maya builders may have used earthen ramps combined with lever systems, slowly lowering the lid into place with ropes while workers stabilized it from multiple sides. Experimental archaeology suggests that such systems could theoretically move objects of similar mass, but the precise method used at Palenque remains uncertain because no direct written description of the process survives. Once the massive stone block had been positioned, an even more extraordinary stage of work began. The carving of the relief itself. The surface of the lid is covered by an elaborate composition representing Pakal in a cosmological scene involving the Maya world tree, celestial symbols and mythological creatures. Hundreds of individual elements, including glyphs, serpents, and decorative scrolls, are arranged in an intricate layout that scholars have studied for decades. High-resolution scans of the relief reveal that many lines are only a few millimeters wide yet maintain consistent depth and precision across the entire slab. Achieving such accuracy without metal chisels would have required tools made from harder stones, such as obsidian or chert, along with abrasion techniques using sand and water. The level of craftsmanship has often been compared to the finest bas-reliefs of ancient Mesopotamia or the stone carvings of Angkor, demonstrating that Maya artisans possessed both artistic skill and technical discipline equal to other great civilizations of the ancient world. Archaeological investigations conducted since the tomb's discovery have continued to shed light on this extraordinary artifact. In the 1990s and early 2000s, conservation teams used laser scanning and digital modelling to document every detail of the relief in order to monitor erosion and structural stress. These studies confirmed that the lid was carved with remarkable geometric planning. The central figure and surrounding motifs align along carefully balanced axes that suggest the design was mapped out before carving began. Excavations around Palenque have also uncovered workshops and unfinished stone pieces, indicating that the city supported specialised artisans capable of handling large-scale sculptural projects. Yet despite decades of research, many aspects of the engineering process remain uncertain. Today, the Palenque astronaut relief continues to fascinate historians, archaeologists, and enthusiasts of ancient mysteries. Although modern scholars interpret the scene as a symbolic depiction of Pakal's journey through the Maya cosmos rather than evidence of extraterrestrial technology, the technical achievement behind the artifact remains extraordinary. Quarrying, transporting, carving, and installing a multi-ton stone slab deep inside a pyramid required remarkable planning and coordination. More than 1,300 years later, the lid still rests exactly where Maya builders placed it, standing as a testament to the ingenuity and advanced craftsmanship of this ancient civilization. How do you think the ancient Maya managed to transport and precisely place a multi-ton stone deep inside a pyramid more than 1,300 years ago? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising quietly above the rolling hills of southern Ohio, the Great Serpent Mound remains one of the most astonishing and enigmatic earthworks ever created in North America. Stretching approximately 411 meters, 1,348 feet, in length, the monument forms the unmistakable shape of a giant serpent with a coiled tail and a head that appears to swallow or cradle a large oval shape. Unlike typical burial mounds built by many ancient North American cultures, the Great Serpent Mound contains no graves, chambers, or burial artifacts, suggesting that it served a very different purpose. What makes the site truly extraordinary and still deeply puzzling to modern researchers is not only its symbolic design, but the immense scale and remarkable geometric precision achieved by its builders, who created the structure using only earth, stone, and primitive tools many centuries before modern surveying equipment existed. When viewed from the ground, the monument appears simply as a long, low ridge of soil winding across a plateau. Yet when seen from the air or through satellite imagery, the true form becomes unmistakable. A perfectly composed serpent with 7 graceful coils and a spiraling tail, arranged with surprising balance and proportion. Archaeologists estimate that constructing the mound required the movement of thousands of tons of soil and clay, carefully layered and compacted to maintain structural stability. The mound averages about 1.2 meters, 4 feet, in height, and roughly 6 meters, 20 feet, in width. Dimensions that remain consistent across much of its length. Achieving this level of uniformity across more than 400 meters would challenge even modern construction teams without the aid of precise measurement tools. Yet the ancient builders managed to maintain smooth curves, controlled proportions, and an overall design that appears intentionally symmetrical when seen from above. This raises one of the most intriguing questions about the Great Serpent Mound. How could ancient engineers design such a large and complex figure without the ability to view it from the air? Unlike modern artists who might rely on aerial perspectives, drones, or satellite imagery, the mound's creators worked entirely from ground level. Scholars have suggested that they may have used wooden stakes, rope measurements, and geometric planning techniques to map the design across the landscape. However, no direct archaeological evidence, such as preserved stake holes or planning diagrams, has yet been discovered to confirm exactly how the layout was executed. The challenge becomes even more impressive when compared to other large ancient geoglyphs around the world. For example, the famous Nazca lines in Peru, created between 500 BCE and 500 CE, also display large animal figures visible primarily from above. Yet the Nazca figures were made by removing surface stones from the desert floor, a relatively simple technique compared with the enormous effort required to transport and sculpt massive volumes of earth into raised forms as seen at Great Serpent Mound. Archaeological excavations conducted in the late 19th century by Frederick Ward Putnam, or one of the first professional archaeologists in the United States, revealed that the mound was carefully constructed in layers. Putnam documented that the builders first prepared a base of clay and stones, then gradually piled soil on top, shaping it into the long serpent body. Later surveys and soil analyses confirmed that the mound was intentionally engineered to resist erosion. In some areas, the builders even used multiple soil types, possibly chosen for their drainage and structural properties. Considering that the mound has survived for more than 1,000 years, enduring centuries of rainfall, vegetation growth and natural erosion, the engineering knowledge implied by its construction is remarkable. Even more intriguing is the location chosen for the monument. The mound sits on a narrow ridge above a steep valley. Within the boundaries of a geological formation known as the Serpent Mound crater, an ancient meteor impact structure estimated to be about 250 to 300 million years old. Some researchers believe that the unusual terrain created by this impact may have influenced the choice of location. Building such a long and continuous earthwork on this elevated plateau required careful surveying to ensure the serpent's body followed the contours of the land without collapsing or distorting its shape. Modern topographic studies indicate that the builders deliberately aligned the curves of the serpent with the ridge's natural slopes, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of terrain management and landscape engineering, adding another layer of mystery. Several researchers have proposed that the mound may incorporate astronomical alignments. In the 1980s, scholar Clark Hardman conducted a detailed survey suggesting that the serpent's head aligns closely with the sunset on the summer solstice, while portions of the body's coils correspond to solar and lunar events, including the winter solstice and certain lunar standstills. If these alignments were intentional, they would imply that the builders possessed advanced observational knowledge of celestial cycles. Similar astronomical planning can be seen in other ancient monuments, such as Stonehenge in England or the Chaco Canyon structures of the American Southwest, where architecture was aligned with seasonal solar events. However, unlike those stone structures, the Great Serpent Mound expresses these potential alignments through a massive sculptural landscape form, making the achievement even more unusual. Another long-standing debate concerns who actually built the mound. Early researchers attributed the monument to the Adena culture, a group known for constructing burial mounds across the Ohio Valley between roughly 1000 BCE and 200 BCE. However, radiocarbon testing conducted in 1996 produced surprising results, suggesting that some parts of the mound may date to around 1070 CE, linking it instead to the later Fort Ancient culture. This discrepancy has sparked ongoing debate among archaeologists. Some propose that the mound may have been built by one culture and later repaired or modified by another, while others argue that the dating samples may represent later restoration activities rather than the original construction. Despite more than a century of archaeological research, including excavations, soil analysis, radiocarbon dating and modern LiDAR surveys, the Great Serpent Mound still has no definitive explanation. Its enormous scale, precise geometry, and symbolic meaning continue to raise many questions for scientists. How were ancient builders able to design a perfectly balanced structure stretching more than 400 meters across the landscape? What measurement methods or geometric principles did they use to create such smooth and accurate curves? And why was the serpent shape chosen? Was it a spiritual symbol, an astronomical marker, or perhaps an ancient story carved into the land? Even today, and with satellites, drones, and advanced mapping technology, the central mystery remains. How a prehistoric society, using only simple tools and shared knowledge, managed to create one of the most geometrically impressive earthworks on Earth. How do you think ancient people were able to create the Great Serpent Mound with such incredible scale and precision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Bhimbetka cave paintings, located within the vast sandstone formations of the Bhimbetka rock shelters in central India, represent one of the most extraordinary collections of prehistoric art ever discovered. Spread across more than 700 rock shelters, with roughly 400 containing visible paintings, the site preserves an artistic record spanning an immense stretch of human history. Archaeological research suggests that some of the earliest paintings may date back over 30,000 years, while others were added during the Mesolithic, Chalcolithic, and even early historic periods. This means Bhimbetka functioned as a continuously used artistic landscape for tens of millennia. The shelters themselves were first brought to international scientific attention in 1957, when Indian archaeologist V.S. Wakankar reportedly noticed unusual rock formations from a train and later explored the region in detail. Subsequent archaeological surveys conducted by the Archaeological Survey of India uncovered hundreds of painted panels depicting animals, hunting scenes, ritual dances, and symbolic figures. These discoveries eventually led to the site being recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site in 2003. Yet despite decades of research, Bhimbetka continues to raise difficult questions about the technological abilities of the prehistoric artists who created these images. One of the most striking characteristics of the Bhimbetka paintings is their remarkable durability. Even after tens of thousands of years, many figures remain clearly visible, particularly those painted in deep red or reddish-brown tones. Scientific analysis indicates that these pigments were primarily derived from hematite, an iron-rich mineral that produces a strong red colour when ground into powder. Other colours, including white and yellow, appear to have been made from kaolin clay, limestone, and natural earth pigments. What makes the paintings unusual is the way these pigments have adhered to the sandstone surfaces for such an immense span of time. In many cases, the colour appears to have penetrated microscopic pores in the rock, creating a bond that has resisted rain, wind erosion, and dramatic climatic shifts. Some researchers have suggested that prehistoric artists may have mixed pigments with organic binders such as plant resin, animal fat, or tree sap, creating a primitive but surprisingly durable paint mixture. However, all because organic compounds degrade over thousands of years, determining the exact chemical recipe has proven extremely difficult. When compared with other famous cave art sites such as Lascaux Cave in France or Altamira Cave, the Bhimbetka paintings show a similar reliance on mineral pigments, yet the environmental conditions are very different. European cave paintings are often located deep inside enclosed chambers, protected from sunlight and weather, while many Bhimbetka paintings are exposed on open rock surfaces. Despite this exposure, many of the images have survived for thousands of years, raising questions about how prehistoric artists achieved such stability in their pigments. Perhaps the most intriguing mystery surrounding the Bhimbetka cave paintings concerns the tools and techniques used to create them. Unlike modern paintings, which leave behind brushes, palettes, or other artistic equipment, prehistoric cave art rarely preserves the tools used by the artists. At Bhimbetka, archaeologists have found almost no direct evidence of painting instruments, leaving researchers to reconstruct the techniques indirectly from the characteristics of the images themselves. Many of the figures show remarkably controlled lines, some only a few millimeters thick. In hunting scenes, for example, the legs of animals such as deer and bison are drawn with long, continuous strokes that remain consistent in width from start to finish. Such precision suggests that the artists were not simply smearing pigment onto the rock with their fingers. Instead, they likely used some form of brush or applicator, possibly made from plant fibers, twigs, animal hair. or even feather tips. Experimental archaeology has shown that brushes made from chewed plant stems or bundles of grass can produce lines very similar to those seen in the Bhimbetka paintings. Another puzzling feature is the presence of large painted figures positioned several meters above the ground. Some of the animal depictions and human scenes appear on vertical rock faces that would have been difficult to reach without assistance. This raises the possibility that prehistoric artists constructed temporary scaffolding or used natural rock ledges to reach higher surfaces. However, because wood and plant materials decay rapidly in tropical environments, no physical remains of such structures have survived. The level of compositional planning also hints at sophisticated artistic methods. In certain shelters, archaeologists have identified multiple layers of paintings, sometimes as many as 6 or 7 distinct phases created over thousands of years. Later artists occasionally painted new scenes over earlier ones, but in many cases they carefully avoided obscuring older images. This suggests an awareness of spatial composition and perhaps even a cultural tradition of respecting earlier artwork. The precision of some images becomes even more remarkable when compared with other prehistoric art sites. In the cave paintings of Chauvet Cave, dated to roughly 32,000 years ago, artists used charcoal and shading techniques to create realistic animals. At Bhimbetka, however, many paintings rely on simple yet highly controlled outlines, demonstrating that prehistoric artists could achieve impressive accuracy with minimal tools. The existence of such refined line work raises a difficult question. How did communities without metal tools or advanced technology develop painting techniques capable of such consistency? Some researchers have proposed that the artists may have used stone grinding tools to prepare pigments, mixing powdered minerals with water or organic substances in small stone depressions. Others suggest that certain shapes may have been created using stencils or primitive blowing techniques, similar to methods found in Paleolithic caves in Europe and Indonesia. Yet none of these theories fully explains the remarkable uniformity of the lines found in several Bhimbetka panels. As a result, the exact process by which these ancient artists produced their images remains one of the site's greatest unsolved mysteries. Another fascinating aspect of Bhimbetka is the way its paintings record a long sequence of cultural changes. Archaeologists have identified several stylistic phases, beginning with large animal depictions believed to date to the Upper Paleolithic period. Later Mesolithic paintings depict smaller animals, human figures, and complex hunting scenes involving groups of archers. By the time of the Chalcolithic and early historic periods, the subject matter had evolved to include domesticated animals, riders on horseback, and ceremonial gatherings. These changes provide a visual record of how human societies in the region gradually shifted from hunter-gatherer lifestyles toward agriculture and organized communities. The presence of overlapping paintings from different periods effectively transforms the rock shelters into a layered archive of human culture spanning tens of thousands of years. The Bhimbetka cave paintings at Bhimbetka rock shelters reveal the remarkable artistic ability of prehistoric humans. The durable pigments, clear compositions, and precise lines suggest that the artists had a strong understanding of materials and painting techniques. However, because no painting tools have been discovered, scientists still do not know exactly how these artworks were created. This is why Bhimbetka remains an enduring archaeological mystery even today. If prehistoric artists created these incredibly precise paintings tens of thousands of years ago, what tools or techniques do you think they might have used? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Koso Rock Art District petroglyphs, located in the remote volcanic landscape of the Koso Range in eastern California, represent one of the most extraordinary concentrations of prehistoric rock art ever discovered. Archaeologists estimate that the region contains more than 100,000 individual petroglyphs, carved across an area of roughly 40 square kilometres within what is now the Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake. The carvings were created by Native American hunter-gatherer cultures over a vast period of time, with some images believed to date back between 8,000 and 10,000 years. Although rock art sites exist across the world, few rival the sheer density and complexity found at Koso. In certain narrow canyons, researchers have documented hundreds of carvings on a single rock face, and sometimes layered on top of one another from different historical periods. The scale of this artistic activity suggests that the region functioned as a major cultural or ritual centre for thousands of years. Yet beyond its sheer quantity, what truly fascinates researchers is the unexpected technical sophistication of the engravings, particularly the remarkable geometric precision displayed in many of the carvings, a feature that remains difficult to fully explain with the simple stone tools believed to have been available at the time. Most of the petroglyphs at Koso are carved into dark volcanic basalt, a rock known for its hardness, typically measuring around 6 on the Mohs hardness scale. Creating deep and controlled engravings in such material would have required significant effort even with metal tools. Yet the ancient artists responsible for these images likely possessed only hammerstones and other basic lithic implements. The common technique believed to have been used is known as pecking, in which the artist repeatedly strikes the rock surface to remove small fragments and gradually form a design. However, many Koso engravings display a level of refinement that suggests more than simple repetitive pecking. The surfaces inside certain carved figures appear evenly textured, while outlines remain sharp and consistent. This indicates that the artists may have combined pecking with abrasion and polishing techniques, possibly using sand or harder stone to smooth the surface. Even more intriguing is the fact that some carvings show remarkably consistent curvature and symmetrical proportions, which would be extremely difficult to achieve without a deliberate system of planning or measurement. Among the most striking examples of this precision are the numerous geometric symbols scattered throughout the Koso canyons. These include spirals, concentric circles, radiating lines, grids, and complex abstract forms. At first glance they may appear simple, yet closer examination reveals that many of them exhibit carefully controlled proportions and highly regular spacing. Some spiral carvings, for instance, maintain an almost constant distance between each coil, forming shapes that resemble mathematically generated curves rather than spontaneous sketches. In several documented cases, archaeologists have measured spirals whose curves maintain a consistent progression similar to a logarithmic or Archimedean spiral, though whether this resemblance is intentional remains debated. What is clear, however, is that such forms required careful planning and spatial awareness. Carving a smooth spiral on an uneven basalt surface would demand not only artistic skill, but also the ability to visualize geometry across irregular terrain. Field surveys conducted throughout the 20th century have repeatedly highlighted this unusual precision. During the 1960s and 1970s, archaeologist Robert Heiser and his colleagues carried out some of the earliest systematic documentation of the Koso petroglyphs. Later, extensive studies in the 1980s and 1990s by researchers such as David S. Whitley and teams working within the China Lake Archaeological Program mapped thousands of individual panels. These investigations revealed that many geometric patterns were not random decorations but appeared repeatedly in similar proportions across different sites. For example, circular motifs were often carved with remarkably even diameters, and certain symmetrical arrangements of lines appear to follow consistent layouts. When compared to rock art sites in other regions, such as the Valcamonica in Italy, or the famous carvings of Tassili in the Sahara. The Koso engravings stand out for their frequent use of balanced geometric compositions, rather than purely figurative imagery. Another factor that deepens the mystery is that many of these precise carvings appear on irregular and sloping rock surfaces where maintaining symmetry would be extremely challenging. Unlike a flat drawing surface, the basalt boulders of the Koso range often contain natural fractures, bumps and uneven angles, yet despite these obstacles, numerous carvings maintain consistent shapes when viewed from the intended perspective. Some researchers have suggested that the artists may have outlined the design beforehand using charcoal or scratching techniques, allowing them to maintain proportions during the carving process. However, no definitive physical evidence of such guidelines has been discovered. Without rulers, compasses, or metal tools, the creators of these petroglyphs somehow achieved forms that appear carefully measured and deliberately organized. The extraordinary precision of these shapes becomes even more remarkable when one considers the enormous quantity of carvings present. Archaeological surveys estimate that certain canyon complexes within the district contain several thousand images within only a few hundred meters, many of which include geometric elements. Replicating such forms repeatedly across thousands of carvings suggests that the artists possessed not only technical skill, but also shared conventions or symbolic systems that dictated how these shapes should be produced. Some anthropologists have proposed that the geometric patterns may relate to visionary experiences associated with shamanistic rituals, since similar abstract forms appear in trance imagery described in ethnographic studies. Others argue that the patterns may encode territorial markers, astronomical references, or symbolic maps. Yet none of these explanations fully accounts for the level of geometric consistency observed in the carvings. Archaeological dating methods provide additional context for this mystery. The petroglyphs were created by removing the dark outer coating of basalt known as desert varnish, exposing the lighter rock beneath. Over centuries, new mineral layers gradually form on the exposed surface, slowly darkening it again. By analysing the degree of varnish regrowth, researchers have estimated that some carvings may be many thousands of years old, with certain panels potentially approaching 10 millennia in age. This means that the geometric carvings were produced long before the development of advanced measuring instruments or metal tools in the region. The persistence of similar shapes across multiple periods also suggests that the knowledge of how to create them was passed down through generations. Comparisons with other prehistoric artistic traditions highlight just how unusual the Koso site may be. In Europe, for example, Upper Paleolithic cave paintings such as those in Lascaux or Chauvet emphasize realistic depictions of animals, but rarely display extensive geometric systems carved into hard stone. Likewise, the rock art of the Sahara often focuses on scenes of daily life and ritual. By contrast, the Koso rock art district combines both figurative imagery, especially the famous bighorn sheep carvings, and a striking array of geometric patterns that appear almost schematic in nature. Some scholars have even suggested that the geometric carvings might represent a form of symbolic communication, possibly encoding information in ways that modern researchers have yet to decipher. Despite decades of research, the purpose and techniques behind these precise geometric carvings remain unclear. Using modern tools like 3D scanning, archaeologists continue to study the engravings. Yet one question persists: how did prehistoric people, with only simple stone tools, carve thousands of accurate geometric figures into hard basalt? The site still leaves researchers wondering whether these carvings were simple art or traces of lost ancient knowledge. Do you think the extremely precise geometric carvings at the Koso rock art district were created using only simple stone tools? Or could they suggest that ancient people possessed a system of knowledge or techniques that we still do not fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden in the harsh landscape of the Colorado Desert in southeastern California lies one of North America's most puzzling ancient creations, the Blythe intaglios. These enormous ground figures, sometimes called desert geoglyphs, stretch across the barren terrain near the Colorado River not far from the modern town of Blythe. At first glance, the desert appears empty and lifeless, but when viewed from the air, the ground suddenly reveals massive shapes, human figures, animals and geometric patterns etched directly into the surface of the earth. The most astonishing aspect of these ancient creations is not merely their size, but the deceptively simple technique used to create them. Instead of building structures or placing stones, the creators of the Blythe intaglios formed these gigantic images simply by removing a thin layer of dark desert gravel, exposing the lighter soil beneath. With this minimal intervention, they produced figures so large that some stretch more than 50 meters in length, yet remain clearly visible even from thousands of meters above the ground. The Blythe intaglios were first discovered in 1932, when a pilot named George Palmer noticed unusual shapes while flying over the desert. From the air, the designs appeared unmistakably deliberate. One enormous human-like figure stretched across the ground, with arms and legs extended, while other nearby shapes depicted animals or abstract forms. What makes the discovery remarkable is that these images are almost impossible to recognize fully from the ground. Standing beside one of the lines, a visitor might see nothing more than shallow trenches in the desert floor, often only a few centimeters deep. Yet when viewed from above, the shallow lines form perfectly recognizable shapes. This raises an intriguing question that archaeologists continue to debate. How could ancient people design images of such enormous scale when they likely never saw them from the air? The technique used to create the Blythe intaglios appears deceptively simple. The desert surface in this region is covered by what geologists call desert pavement, a natural layer of dark, sun-baked stones that accumulate over thousands of years. Beneath this thin layer lies lighter-coloured soil. By carefully scraping away the darker stones, ancient builders created bright lines that contrasted sharply with the surrounding terrain. Each line might be only 2 to 4 centimeters deep, yet when arranged across dozens of meters they formed giant images visible from the sky. In effect, the artists were not constructing figures at all. They were revealing them by subtraction, carving massive designs out of the landscape itself. This method is strikingly similar to the technique used to create the famous Nazca lines of Peru, which were produced by removing dark stones to expose pale ground beneath. However, the Blythe intaglios demonstrate that such large-scale landscape art was not limited to South America. In fact, the Californian figures show that cultures in North America were also capable of conceptualizing designs on a scale that rivals some of the largest geoglyph traditions on Earth. Among the most impressive figures at the site is a gigantic human form measuring roughly 52 meters long, making it longer than a modern Olympic swimming pool. The proportions of the figure, its head, torso, arms and legs, are surprisingly balanced, suggesting that the designers had some method of maintaining scale and symmetry while working on the ground. Archaeologists studying aerial photographs have noted that the arms extend outward with relatively consistent angles, while the legs maintain a recognizable human shape. Creating such proportional designs across a desert surface would have required careful planning. Even a small measurement error could distort the figure dramatically over distances of tens of meters, yet the Blythe figures remain surprisingly coherent when viewed from above. One possible explanation is that ancient builders used stakes and ropes to lay out their designs, much like surveyors marking boundaries. Similar methods have been proposed for the construction of the Nazca lines. However, direct archaeological evidence for such tools at the Blythe site remains limited. no preserved wooden stakes or alignment markers have been found in situ, which leaves researchers relying largely on theoretical reconstructions. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to recreate geoglyphs using simple tools such as wooden poles, cords, and basic measurement techniques. Their results demonstrate that such methods are possible, but they also reveal how complex the process becomes when dealing with figures spanning dozens of meters. Maintaining consistent proportions across the desert would require coordinated teamwork, clear planning, and possibly a detailed design drawn on a smaller scale beforehand. The age of the Blythe intaglios is another subject of ongoing research. Archaeologists generally associate them with indigenous cultures of the lower Colorado River region, possibly the Patayan culture, which flourished in the area between approximately 2,000 and 500 years ago. Some estimates suggest the figures may date to around 700 to 900 years old, although exact dating is difficult because the geoglyphs contain no organic material that can be directly radiocarbon dated. Instead, researchers rely on indirect clues such as nearby artifacts, historical accounts from indigenous groups, and the degree of desert pavement restoration within the lines. Over time, wind and natural processes gradually reform the dark stone surface, meaning that older geoglyphs tend to accumulate new stones within their lines. By analysing this process, scientists attempt to estimate how long the designs have been exposed. Another mystery lies in the extraordinary durability of the geoglyphs. In many environments, marks scratched into soil would disappear within decades due to erosion, rainfall, and plant growth. Yet the Blythe intaglios have remained visible for centuries, possibly even millennia. The explanation likely lies in the unique stability of desert pavement. Once the top layer of stones is removed, the exposed soil becomes compacted and relatively resistant to wind erosion. Because the region receives very little rainfall, often less than 10 centimeters per year, the lines remain preserved with minimal disturbance. Even so, the continued visibility of the figures over such long periods remains remarkable. Several archaeological investigations have attempted to document and analyse the site. Surveys conducted during the mid-20th century used aerial photography to map the geoglyphs in detail. Later studies employed satellite imagery and modern mapping technologies to measure the precise dimensions and orientations of the figures. These studies revealed that the Blythe intaglios are not random shapes but carefully arranged compositions. Some figures appear aligned with nearby geographic features such as the Colorado River or nearby mountain ranges, suggesting that their placement may have held symbolic meaning. The purpose of the Blythe intaglios remains uncertain. Some researchers believe the figures were created for ceremonial or spiritual purposes, perhaps representing mythological beings or ancestral figures important to local indigenous traditions. Oral histories from tribes such as the Mojave have occasionally been interpreted as references to giant figures associated with creation stories. Others suggest that the geoglyphs may have marked sacred pathways or gathering sites for seasonal rituals. Another theory proposes that the figures functioned as territorial symbols, visible from surrounding hills or elevated vantage points. Yet even with these theories, many questions remain unanswered. Why were such enormous figures created in a place where they could not easily be seen from ground level? How did ancient designers ensure the correct proportions across distances longer than a football field? And why did they choose a technique that relied solely on removing a thin layer of desert stones, rather than constructing more durable monuments? What makes the Blythe intaglios remarkable is that these massive desert figures were created simply by removing a thin layer of stones, exposing lighter soil beneath. With lines only a few centimeters deep, ancient builders produced giant images that have survived for centuries. These geoglyphs reveal that ancient cultures likely possessed surprising knowledge of planning, geometry, and landscape design. making Blythe intaglios one of North America's most fascinating archaeological mysteries. In your opinion, how were ancient people able to create enormous figures like the Blythe intaglios simply by removing a thin layer of desert stones while still maintaining accurate proportions across dozens of meters? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. Hidden deep within the sandstone mountains of the Sahara Desert in southwestern Libya lies one of the most astonishing and enigmatic archives of prehistoric human creativity, the rock art of Tadrart Acacus. Scattered across cliffs, caves and wind-carved rock shelters, thousands of paintings and engravings stretch across a timeline that archaeologists estimate spans nearly 12,000 years, from roughly 10,000 BCE to the early centuries of the Common Era. At first glance, the images appear to be simple depictions of animals, hunters, herders, and ritual scenes, yet the deeper researchers study them, the more puzzling questions emerge. Among the many mysteries surrounding the site, perhaps the most remarkable concerns the technology behind the pigments themselves. The colours used in these paintings, reds, yellows, browns, blacks, and occasionally white, remain surprisingly vivid despite having endured thousands of years of scorching sunlight, desert winds and dramatic temperature shifts that routinely exceed 40 degrees Celsius during the day and drop sharply at night. This durability raises an extraordinary question. How did prehistoric artists living in a harsh desert environment develop pigment mixtures capable of surviving for millennia? The existence of these paintings first came to wider scholarly attention during the mid-20th century, when Italian archaeologist Fabrizio Mori conducted systematic surveys of the Acacus Mountains beginning in the 1950s. Over several expeditions, he documented hundreds of sites containing rock art, many hidden in remote valleys, accessible only by long journeys through the desert. Later surveys expanded this number dramatically. Today, researchers estimate that the wider Acacus region contains many thousands of images, ranging from small hand-sized figures to elaborate scenes covering entire rock walls. Radiocarbon dating of organic residues, along with stylistic comparisons and archaeological layers found near painted shelters, suggests that the paintings were created across multiple cultural phases, commonly referred to as the wild fauna, roundhead, pastoral, horse, and camel periods. Each phase reflects a changing environment and evolving human societies, yet the pigments themselves remain one of the most persistent puzzles. Scientific analyses carried out on several samples have revealed that many of the colours originate from naturally occurring minerals. Red pigments often derive from hematite, an iron oxide mineral widely used in prehistoric art across the world. Yellow tones appear to come from hydrated iron oxides such as goethite, while darker shades sometimes contain manganese compounds or charcoal. On the surface, this seems straightforward. Prehistoric artists collected coloured minerals and ground them into powder. However, the real mystery lies in what was mixed with those powders. Mineral pigments alone do not adhere well to bare rock surfaces, especially under the extreme erosion conditions of the Sahara. Yet the paintings of Tadrart Acacus have remained visible for thousands of years, suggesting that the artist used some form of binding medium to attach the pigment to the stone. Researchers have proposed several possibilities, and some chemical traces detected in microscopic analysis hint at organic substances such as plant resins, animal fat, blood, egg proteins, or even milk. These materials could have acted as primitive paint binders, helping the pigment stick to the rock surface and resist weathering. But despite decades of study, no single formula has been confirmed. Unlike later civilizations that left written records of artistic techniques, the creators of Acacus rock art left only the images themselves. This means archaeologists must rely on minute traces embedded in the paint layers, often no thicker than a fraction of a millimetre, to reconstruct the original mixture. Even with modern spectroscopy and laboratory techniques, the results remain inconclusive. The pigments appear to contain complex organic signatures that may have degraded over time, leaving behind only fragments of their original chemical structure. What makes this puzzle even more intriguing is the remarkable longevity of the colours. In many locations, the red figures of cattle, hunters, and dancers still stand out clearly against the pale sandstone background, even though the paintings may be several thousand years old. To appreciate how extraordinary this is, it helps to compare the Acacus paintings with other ancient artworks. For instance, some of the famous cave paintings of Lascaux in France, roughly 17,000 years old, have been preserved largely because they remained sealed inside stable cave environments, protected from sunlight and wind. In contrast, the paintings of Tadrart Acacus exist in open rock shelters exposed to harsh desert conditions. Windblown sand acts like natural sandpaper, gradually eroding exposed surfaces. Temperatures fluctuate dramatically, causing the rock to expand and contract. Yet despite these destructive forces, many Acacus pigments still retain recognizable color. This suggests that the ancient painters did not simply apply crushed minerals, but developed surprisingly sophisticated mixtures capable of penetrating microscopic pores in the sandstone and forming a durable bond. Another clue comes from the layering of the paintings themselves. In some shelters, archaeologists have observed that later artists painted new images over older ones, sometimes separated by centuries or even millennia. These layers reveal that different communities repeatedly return to the same locations to create new artwork. Interestingly, the pigments used in different periods often vary in shade and texture, implying that artists experimented with multiple pigment recipes. Some figures appear smooth and evenly coloured, while others show grainy textures suggesting thicker pigment suspensions. This variation hints at a long tradition of knowledge about how to prepare and apply paint, knowledge that must have been transmitted across generations without written language. Field studies conducted during the late 20th and early 21st centuries have attempted to replicate these pigments experimentally. Researchers collected mineral samples from the surrounding desert and attempted to recreate prehistoric paint mixtures using natural binders such as animal fat or plant gum. Some of these experiments produced pigments that adhered well to rock surfaces, but none have fully replicated the extraordinary durability observed in the original paintings. Even modern experimental paints tend to fade or flake after prolonged exposure to desert weather, while the Acacus paintings have survived thousands of years. This discrepancy continues to puzzle scientists and suggests that the prehistoric artists may have used a combination of ingredients or preparation techniques that remain unknown. Adding to the mystery is the environmental context in which the paintings were created. Today, the Acacus Mountains lie within one of the driest regions on Earth, but archaeological and climatic evidence indicates that during much of the period when the paintings were made, the Sahara was dramatically greener. Lakes, rivers, and grasslands once covered large areas of what is now desert. Many Acacus paintings depict animals such as giraffes, elephants, cattle, and even aquatic creatures, species that could only have lived in a much wetter environment. These images not only reveal the changing climate of the Sahara, but also suggest that ancient inhabitants possessed detailed knowledge of the landscape and its resources. Such knowledge might have included access to particular minerals, plants, or organic materials used in pigment production. Even so, the precise techniques behind the paints remain elusive. Did artists grind minerals with stone mortars and mix them with animal fat heated over fire? Did they ferment plant resins to create stronger adhesives? Or did they use ingredients that no longer survive in detectable form? Without written records or preserved tools, these questions remain largely speculative. Each new scientific analysis provides fragments of information, yet the full recipe, the ancient technology of paint that allowed colours to endure across millennia, remains hidden. Today, the rock art of Tadrart Acacus is recognised as one of the most important prehistoric art landscapes in the world. It has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, not only because of the sheer number of images, but also because they document the long transformation of human societies in the Sahara. Yet beyond their cultural significance, the paintings continue to challenge modern understanding of ancient technology. The pigments used by artists thousands of years ago appear to possess a resilience that researchers still struggle to reproduce, in a world where modern paints often fade within decades. The survival of Acacus colours across thousands of years stands as a silent testament to lost knowledge. What do you think prehistoric artists at Tadrart Acacus used to create pigments that could survive thousands of years in such harsh desert conditions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Among the ancient stone hills sprawling like fossilised waves across the Zimbabwean plateau lies a place where the boundary between the physical world and the spiritual realm seems to blur: the Matobo Hills Njelele Shrine. For centuries, this sacred site has not only stood as the spiritual heart of the Tonga and Shona people, but also as a mysterious ceremonial centre shrouded in strange stories, unexplained phenomena, and traces of a forgotten ancient knowledge. Amid the granite domes rising like the vaults of another world, Njelele endures as a living symbol of the contact between early humanity and the divine, a place where enigmatic carvings etched into stone may hold the key to a chapter of history that has never been written. Who do you think created the mysterious stone maps and ancient carvings around the Njelele shrine? A lost civilization, or a form of knowledge we have yet to understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Since ancient times, Njelele has been regarded as the dwelling place of ancestral spirits, unseen forces deeply woven into the spiritual lives of the local people. The site contains no man-made structures, no walls, no pillars, no carved temple, only stone upon stone, naturally formed yet transformed into sacred space. This simplicity amplifies its mystique, for no one truly understands how a site empty of architecture became a major ceremonial centre for so many centuries. Elders say that the stones speak, the stones remember, and that when one steps into this sacred space, Diasagayi, they enter the domain of echoes that surpass time. One of the most renowned rituals performed at Njelele is the rain-making ceremony. The custodians of the shrine, believed to be able to communicate with ancestral spirits, carry out rituals to summon rain during severe droughts. Strangely, this tradition has survived for hundreds of years without losing its power or significance. Anthropologists suggest that its longevity may hint at a belief system far older than the known cultures of Zimbabwe, perhaps predating them entirely. Yet despite extensive study, modern science still cannot determine when these rituals first began or who established the strict taboos surrounding the shrine. One of the strangest aspects of Njelele is the annual prohibition against entering or approaching the shrine from October to April. According to the elders, this is the period when the spirits are most active and mortals must not interfere. No one knows how old this rule is. The shrine's guardians simply say it has been passed down from generation to generation. Archaeologists have compared this custom with other African traditions but found no equivalent model. Thus, Njelele stands as a unique crossroad of spiritual practice, where the operational calendar is determined not by seasons or astronomy, but by an invisible cycle of spirits, something beyond scientific measurement. Upon entering the shrine, one immediately notices the peculiar cave structure and its natural acoustics. The narrow, dark entrance suddenly opens into an unexpectedly spacious chamber, giving many the feeling of stepping through a gateway into another world. Wind, footsteps, and even breathing create uncanny echoes, often resembling whispers. Locals call Njelele the voice of the rocks, a place where stone seems to breathe, speak, and respond. Some acoustics experts have documented unusual resonance patterns within the cave, yet none can explain why the sounds resemble human voices with such eerie clarity. Within this mystical environment lies an even stranger phenomenon. Offerings placed inside the shrine vanish without a trace. Worshippers report placing grain, feathers, herbs, or traditional beer at the sacred spot, only to find them gone by the next morning, without footprints, without signs of animals, and with no alternate opening for entry. This has been observed consistently by different people over many decades. Whether a natural phenomenon unknown to modern science or an action by shrine custodians that researchers have yet to uncover, the mystery remains a vivid and enduring part of Njelele's lore. But among all the mysteries surrounding the shrine, nothing puzzles archaeologists more than the stone maps and ancient carvings found on the rocks around it, and they may be the most crucial key to understanding Njelele's past. These strange markings are scattered across many rock surfaces. Some are merely short-incised lines, others are complex geometric symbols, and some resemble miniature topographical maps. Their appearance does not match any known symbolic system of the Shona or Tonga people. They also bear no resemblance to San rock art or that of neighbouring cultures. They possess almost no cultural identity, leaving every attempt at classification in complete deadlock. Many theories have emerged. Some scholars think the carvings may be primitive star maps, charting celestial movements as observed from the Matobo Hills. Others propose that they were used in ceremonial contexts, possibly in rain-making or spiritual communication rituals. Another group believes the symbols represent metaphysical diagrams, pathways of spirits, reflecting ancient cosmological models. Yet the central problem remains. No existing evidence links these carvings to any known cultural tradition in the region. The most unsettling possibility is that the carvings were made by a culture older than any known inhabitants of the region. The markings are too deliberate to be natural, and yet too culturally distinct to match any documented group. Some researchers suggest they may have been created by an ancient people who lived in the Matobo Hills thousands of years ago and vanished without leaving any trace other than these carvings. If so, Njelele may be more than a living shrine. It may be the last surviving footprint of a forgotten civilization whose voice endures only through marks on stone. Another remarkable feature is that many carvings form straight or converging lines that lead toward the central chamber of the cave, the focal point of rituals. This raises intriguing questions. Were the markings intended as ceremonial guides? If so, the creators must have possessed an intimate understanding of the cave and its sacred purpose. Difficult to reconcile if they were not part of the same cultural lineage as modern practitioners. The mismatch between a living spiritual system and a dead symbolic system forms a paradox that remains unsolved. Some symbols strongly resemble topographical diagrams, curved lines, branching figures, concentric circles. Geologists propose that they may depict the granite hill formations around Matobo, suggesting that the ancient carvers sought to record the landscape's shape. But this raises an even deeper question. To portray the terrain so accurately, did they possess aerial perspectives or an unusually advanced sense of spatial abstraction? Either possibility challenges conventional assumptions about early human cognition. Modern imaging technologies have revealed that some carvings align surprisingly well with minor geological fractures beneath the granite surface. This has led to speculation that ancient people may have sensed subsurface energy patterns or structural weaknesses, insight far beyond what is expected of early societies. Yet the evidence remains inconclusive, leaving room for debate over whether this alignment is intentional or merely coincidental. Ultimately, the greatest mystery lies in the fact that the age of the carvings cannot be determined. Carbon dating cannot be applied to granite, and erosion analysis yields results far too vague. As a result, the carvings seem to have fallen out of time, existing, yet belonging to no identifiable era. They resemble messages from a forgotten body of knowledge, tenderly lying silent in the darkness of the cave, waiting to be deciphered. Standing before these carvings, one does not merely see traces of the past, but senses something deeper. The Matobo Hills Njelele Shrine is not just a sacred temple, but a stone-bound manuscript of a concealed civilization. The rain-making rituals, the whispering stones, the seasonal bands, the disappearing offerings – these are only fragments of a larger spiritual archaeological tapestry. Yet the rock maps and ancient carvings, with their strangeness, anonymity, and resistance to explanation, remain the most profound mystery, a doorway into history for which no one has yet found the key. And thus, Njelele continues to exist as a shrine that breathes, sacred, enigmatic, and forever a question that time has not yet answered. Hidden within the dry landscape of southern Peru lies one of the largest and most puzzling rock art sites ever discovered. The Toro Muerto petroglyphs, located in the Majes Valley, about 100 kilometers from the city of Arequipa, contain an immense field of carved volcanic stones scattered across nearly 10 square kilometers of desert terrain. Archaeologists have documented more than 5,000 individual boulders, though many researchers believe the original number may have been significantly higher before erosion and modern disturbances altered the landscape. These stones are covered with thousands of images, dancing human figures, stylized animals, geometric patterns, spirals, and enigmatic symbols whose meanings have long been lost. Most scholars date the carvings roughly between 500 BCE and 1000 CE, thus linking them to several pre-Inca cultures of the region, including the Wari and the Chuquibamba traditions. Yet despite decades of research, Toro Muerto remains a profound archaeological mystery, not only because of the vast number of carvings, but also because of the remarkable techniques apparently used to engrave them into extremely hard volcanic rock. The geological composition of the stones is one of the most fascinating aspects of the site. Many of the boulders consist of andesite and basalt, volcanic rocks known for their density and resistance to erosion. On the Mohs hardness scale, basalt commonly ranks around 6, making it far harder than limestone or sandstone, which were more commonly used for ancient carvings elsewhere in the world. Despite this, the petroglyphs at Toro Muerto often display clean, yet deliberate grooves and surprisingly smooth curves, some only a few millimeters wide yet extending across large sections of the rock's surface. Modern experiments carried out by archaeologists attempting to reproduce the carvings have demonstrated that engraving such rock using only stone tools can require hours or even days for a single small figure, depending on the technique used. Considering that the site contains thousands of complex carvings, the amount of labour required would have been enormous. This raises a fundamental question. How did ancient artists working without modern metal tools achieve such precision across such a massive number of stones? Several archaeological expeditions have attempted to answer this question. In the 1970s, the Peruvian archaeologist Eloy Linares Malaga conducted one of the earliest systematic surveys of Toro Muerto, cataloguing thousands of carved stones and noting the remarkable consistency of many engraved lines. Later research in the 2010s, including digital mapping and drone surveys, revealed patterns in the distribution of the carved boulders. Rather than being randomly scattered, many appear to form clusters or pathways, suggesting that the site may once have been used for ceremonial processions or ritual gatherings. Yet even more puzzling is the evidence related to the carving technique itself. Close examination of the grooves indicates that many were created using a combination of percussion and abrasion, meaning that ancient craftsmen likely struck the rock repeatedly with a harder hammerstone before smoothing the surface through grinding. However, the precision of some lines, particularly those forming spirals and symmetrical geometric motifs, suggests a level of control that is difficult to explain with such simple tools alone. Comparisons with other rock art sites highlight just how unusual Toro Muerto is. For instance, petroglyphs in the Koso rock art district were carved primarily into volcanic rock as well, yet the density of images there is spread over a far larger area, and the individual carvings are generally less geometrically complex. Similarly, the famous engravings of Valcamonica, though numbering in the hundreds of thousands, were largely created in softer, glacially polished stone surfaces. Toro Muerto therefore occupies a unique position, a site where extremely hard volcanic boulders were transformed into canvases for intricate symbolic imagery on an astonishing scale. Some figures even show delicate interior details, such as patterns within human bodies or repeated motifs along animal shapes. Achieving such refinement in basalt would require not only patience, but also a sophisticated understanding of how different stones fracture and wear under repeated impacts. Another intriguing feature is the relationship between the carvings and the desert environment. Many of the stones display a dark natural coating known as desert varnish, a thin layer of manganese and iron oxides that accumulates slowly over centuries. When ancient artists carved into the rock, they removed this dark surface, revealing a lighter layer beneath. Over time, the exposed grooves gradually darkened again as new varnish formed. This natural process complicates attempts to determine the exact age of individual carvings. However, it also provides evidence that some petroglyphs may be far older than previously believed, because the varnish inside certain grooves appears almost as dark as the surrounding rock. Geological studies suggest that forming such a coating could take hundreds to thousands of years, implying that at least some images might predate the cultures traditionally associated with the site. Archaeologists are also intrigued by the thematic diversity of the carvings. Some stones depict lines of dancing figures with raised arms, possibly representing ritual performances or communal ceremonies. Others show llamas and birds, animals that played important roles in Andean culture. Yet many carvings are purely abstract. Spirals, zigzags, grids, and radial patterns that resemble astronomical diagrams or symbolic maps. A few researchers have proposed that these designs might encode cosmological beliefs, perhaps representing constellations or mythological journeys through the sky. While such interpretations remain speculative, the consistent repetition of certain motifs suggests that the artists were following shared symbolic conventions, rather than simply improvising decorative images. Despite decades of research, the mystery of the Toro Muerto petroglyphs remains unsolved. The massive number of carvings suggests a tradition that may have lasted for centuries and involved multiple cultures. The precise grooves carved into extremely hard basalt indicate advanced skills and techniques that archaeologists still struggle to fully explain. Some researchers propose the use of copper alloy tools, while others believe hammerstones and grinding methods could have achieved similar results. Today, the silent volcanic stones of Toro Muerto stand as a vast archive of ancient human expression. Yet without written records, the true purpose of these thousands of carvings, whether ritual, astronomical or symbolic, remains unknown, making the site one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries of ancient art and engineering. How do you think ancient people were able to carve thousands of precise figures into extremely hard volcanic rock without modern technology? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. Hidden in the Alpine Valley of northern Italy lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological archives of human history, the Valcamonica petroglyphs. Spread across hundreds of rock surfaces throughout the valley, this immense collection contains an estimated 140,000 to possibly more than 300,000 engraved figures, making it one of the largest concentrations of prehistoric rock art on Earth. These carvings were created over an astonishing span of time, beginning around 8,000 years ago in the late Mesolithic period and continuing through the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and even into the Roman era. Because of its unmatched scale and historical importance, Valcamonica became Italy's first UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979. Yet despite more than a century of archaeological research, many aspects of the site remain deeply mysterious, especially the remarkable technical precision with which many of the carvings were executed. The existence of the petroglyphs was first brought to wider scholarly attention in the early 20th century. Although local residents had long been aware of strange figures carved into the smooth glacial rocks scattered throughout the valley, systematic documentation only began in 1929, when Italian archaeologist Walter Laeng conducted one of the earliest formal studies. Over the following decades, large-scale surveys were organized by institutions such as the Italian National Research Council and the Centro Comunale di Studi Preistorici, eventually revealing thousands of decorated rock surfaces across the valley. Archaeologists discovered that the images depict a wide variety of subjects: warriors carrying shields and spears, hunters pursuing deer, ploughing scenes showing early agriculture, geometric symbols, solar motifs, labyrinth-like patterns, and even what appear to be topographical maps. Some panels contain dozens or even hundreds of overlapping figures, suggesting that the same rocks were revisited repeatedly across centuries or millennia by different cultural groups. Among the most fascinating and least understood aspects of Valcamonica is the extraordinary precision of the carving technique itself. Most of the figures were created using a method known as pecking, in which the artist repeatedly struck the rock surface with a hard hammer, stone, or metal tool to gradually chip away small fragments and form an image. At first glance, this technique may sound simple, but experimental archaeology has demonstrated that the process is incredibly labor-intensive. Replicating a single medium-sized figure, approximately 30 to 40 centimeters in length, can require several thousand individual hammer strikes. Depending on the hardness of the rock, the creation of a detailed figure might take many hours or even several days of continuous work. The difficulty becomes even more apparent when considering the type of rock involved. Much of the valley's bedrock consists of glacially polished sandstone and metamorphic stone surfaces, which are not easily carved with primitive tools. Yet many of the petroglyphs display remarkably consistent depth and smoothness, with grooves often measuring 2 to 4 millimeters deep while maintaining uniform edges along complex curves and shapes. In some cases, the figures appear so regular that early researchers wondered whether more advanced tools might have been used than previously assumed for the time periods involved. Microscopic analyses conducted during surveys in the 1960s and 1970s revealed densely packed peck marks arranged in extremely controlled patterns, suggesting that the carvers possessed an advanced understanding of stoneworking techniques. One particularly striking example of technical sophistication can be found in the famous Bedolina map, a large rock panel discovered near the village of Capo di Ponte. This engraving appears to represent a stylized landscape composed of grids, pathways, and rectangular fields. Some researchers believe it may depict an ancient agricultural territory or settlement plan. What makes the Bedolina map remarkable is not only its possible function as a proto-cartographic representation, but also the precision with which its geometric shapes were executed. Straight lines intersect at carefully measured angles, and rectangular shapes are arranged in a layout that resembles planned land divisions. Achieving such regularity through repeated hammer strikes on stone would have required careful planning and considerable skill. Comparisons with other prehistoric rock art sites, such as those found in Scandinavia or the Sahara, show that while geometric motifs are common, the level of organized spatial representation seen at Valcamonica is unusually complex. Archaeologists have also noted that many of the human and animal figures demonstrate surprisingly accurate proportions. Hunters are depicted with bows, shields, or spears in positions that reflect dynamic movement, while deer and other animals often appear in recognizable anatomical poses. Although the style remains symbolic rather than naturalistic, the artists clearly possessed a keen observational understanding of their subjects. In certain panels dating to the Iron Age, roughly the first millennium BCE, warriors are shown carrying round shields and wearing elaborate helmets. These details correspond closely with artifacts discovered in archaeological excavations across northern Italy, reinforcing the idea that the carving served as a form of cultural documentation. Excavations and surveys carried out throughout the 20th and 21st centuries have also revealed that the carvings were not created randomly across the landscape. Instead, they tend to appear on smooth rock surfaces shaped by ancient glaciers, which provided ideal natural canvases. Many of these surfaces are located near ancient pathways or elevated viewpoints overlooking the valley floor. This spatial pattern suggests that the carvings may have held ceremonial, communicative, or territorial significance. Some scholars believe the rocks functioned as a kind of open-air archive where successive generations recorded events, beliefs, or social identities. Despite more than a century of research, many mysteries about Valcamonica remain unsolved. And our one key question is how prehistoric communities maintained such consistent carving techniques for thousands of years. The basic pecking method remained stable across generations, suggesting knowledge was carefully passed down, yet no clear evidence of training systems or workshops has been found. Another mystery is the immense scale of the carvings. Producing hundreds of thousands of figures using thousands of hammer strikes per image would have required enormous time and effort, implying these engravings held major cultural or spiritual importance. Even today, despite modern technologies like laser scanning and digital mapping, the deeper meaning of many carvings and the full extent of the technical knowledge behind them remains unknown. The precision of these ancient stone engravings continues to challenge our understanding of prehistoric technology. How do you think prehistoric people achieved such incredible precision in stone carving thousands of years ago? Let us know your theory in the comments below. In a remote mountainous region of Tripura, where nature has preserved its pristine beauty for thousands of years, there exists a place that makes anyone who sets foot there pause and stare in silence. Not because of grand architecture, nor because of the remains of a great civilization recorded in history, but because here, among colossal basalt cliffs, lies a rock-carving complex so strange that it challenges every reasonable explanation. The Unakoti rock relief complex resembles a message carved directly into the earth, yet the sender has vanished, leaving behind no clues except for the gigantic divine faces silently watching the world. There are no ancient texts describing its construction, no records of the artisans who worked on it, and no evidence of any dynasty or religion powerful enough to create such a monumental site. All that remains are the statues, the reliefs, and the questions that only grow deeper the more one observes. What do you think ancient artisans used to carve those massive deity figures directly into hard basalt cliffs with such incredible precision? Share your theory in the comments below. Although Unakoti exhibits many features that make it a large-scale historical mystery, the aspect that troubles researchers most is the presence of massive deity sculptures carved directly into the mountainside. These are not stone blocks shaped elsewhere and assembled into place, nor are they made from softer, more manageable types of stone. Here, the ancients chose the most difficult method. They carved straight into the mountain, using the sheer vertical rock face as their canvas. Standing beneath the more than 10-metre-tall image of Shiva, one feels as though standing before a gateway into a world of giants, for the monument's proportions far exceed what we usually attribute to ancient craftsmen. Every line is sharp, even, and balanced. The face, beard, crown, everything is sculpted with a precision that today's machinery would have to measure carefully to replicate. The real problem is this: how did they do it? Where did the artisans stand to carve something this large? What do they climb on? What tools created such deep incisions without damaging the surrounding stone? And more importantly, how did they maintain accurate proportions for the entire sculpture while working on an uneven cliff face, without measuring grids, technical drawings, or any chance to correct mistakes? A single misplaced strike could ruin the entire figure, yet nearly all carvings at Unakoti show no signs of error or revision. The smooth curves, consistent depth of incised lines, and polished surfaces all suggest that their technique was not only advanced but also stable, repeatable, and possibly part of a skilled tradition completely unknown to us today. Many theories have been proposed to explain how ancient artisans created the enormous deity sculptures at Unakoti, yet all of them reveal significant weaknesses. The idea that bamboo scaffolding was used is quickly dismissed, as bamboo would be too unstable on steep, slippery, moisture-soaked cliffs. Outlining the figures with charcoal or minerals also fails to answer the most crucial question: how did they control carving depth to produce such sharp, three-dimensional details? Some scholars suggest the use of an ancient measuring frame, but no archaeological evidence has ever confirmed the existence of such a device. The complete absence of tool traces has led many experts to believe that the technique used at Unakoti may far exceed what is recorded in the region's known history, almost incompatible with the technological capabilities of that era. An even stranger mystery lies in the positioning of the sculptures. Many are carved in locations that even today, with safety harnesses, climbing gear and modern equipment, require remarkable skill and courage to reach. How did ancient workers stand to create these high reliefs? How did they maintain precision while their bodies dangled or balanced on slippery rock surfaces? There is no concrete answer, for no traces of scaffolding remain, no carved footholds exist, and no signs of specialized metal tools have been found. It is as though the ancients possessed another method entirely, a technique lost and never passed down to later generations. The challenge was not only the location but also the stone itself. Basalt is far harder than the types commonly used for sculpture in ancient South Asia. Carving basalt without advanced iron or steel tools is nearly impossible if one hopes to achieve the level of detail seen at Unakoti. Yet the carvings feature extremely fine, sharp and deep lines. This has led some researchers to wonder whether the artisans once possessed some kind of special tools that no longer survive, and certain fragments bear signs of abrasion by materials harder than basalt, though what those materials were remains unknown. Others speculate that they may have used a secret metal alloy, an idea with no evidence yet often repeated simply because no other explanation fits. Beyond technique, the scale of the entire complex raises further questions. The name Unakoti means one less than a million, referring to the legend that nearly 1 million deities were turned to stone by Shiva at this site. While the actual number is smaller, it is still vast enough to perplex archaeologists. Why would such a remote area contain so many sculptures? There is no trace of an ancient city, no evidence of a major pilgrimage centre, and no signs of a population large enough to support or maintain a project of this magnitude. For what purpose were these carvings made? Worship, commemoration, a ritual now lost to history. Some reliefs feature smooth, detailed artistic styles, while others display sharper, more angular lines, possibly the products of different periods. This suggests that Unakoti may have been created over many generations, but if so, how did the artistic style remain so consistently unified? How could multiple generations of artisans maintain the same techniques when no recognized artistic school existed in the region? If this truly spanned centuries, then Unakoti must have been the greatest artisan training centre in the area, yet such a centre left no archaeological trace at all. Scattered throughout the site are unfinished carvings, a face with only its outline shaped, an incomplete arm, or a partially chiselled surface abruptly abandoned. These remnants raise a haunting question. What happened? Why did the work stop so suddenly? There are no signs of war, no recorded natural disasters, and no evidence of population decline or mass migration during relevant periods. It appears that some sudden event occurred, significant enough to halt the entire operation at once, never to be resumed. Yet what that event was remains unknown. Today, when sunlight strikes the reliefs, making droplets shimmer across the carved surfaces, Unakoti radiates both grandeur and melancholy. It resembles a gateway into a lost chapter of history, a story whose characters have all disappeared, leaving only immense stone faces watching over the land. These sculptures are more than works of art. They are messages from the past, as reminders that certain knowledge, techniques and secrets once existed but were never recorded. Standing before the colossal image of Shiva, one cannot help but wonder, what did the ancients know that we have forgotten today? Perhaps the silent stone faces are already answering. Some truths belong to history not because time preserves them, but because humanity no longer remembers how to interpret them. From the very first moment one's eyes rest upon that silent rocky landscape, there is an immediate sense that this place is unlike any other ancient site. Hidden deep within the mountains of Chongqing, among moss-covered cliffs and heavy mists that seem to guard the secrets of time itself, the Dazu rock carvings emerge as one of the most extraordinary testaments to the capabilities of ancient humanity. Yet what sets this site far beyond conventional archaeological standards is its immense system of statues and reliefs carved directly into sheer rock faces, surfaces that, even today, would require careful planning and advanced equipment to approach. When standing before colossal figures rising 7 or 8 meters high, suspended upon nearly vertical slopes, one cannot help but ask, how were artisans of the Tang and Song dynasties able to create them? The remaining traces reveal no signs of large scaffolding systems or heavy lifting mechanisms, nor any evidence that materials were transported through alternative routes. The surfaces of the carvings bear almost no rough tool marks, as though the images were printed directly into the stone using a technique entirely unknown to history. Every line, soft folds of garments, fluid contours, and remarkably delicate facial features suggest that these ancient craftsmen possessed stoneworking methods far more advanced than recorded in historical texts. Yet this very perfection only deepens the mystery. How could they stand at such dangerous heights, on slippery rock surfaces carving tiny details without a single mistake? And if wooden scaffolding had been used, why are there no remaining anchor holes or structural traces on the cliff? These questions continue to hang in the air like the shadows of the statues themselves, gazing down from impossible heights. How do you think ancient craftsmen were able to carve such massive statues onto sheer cliff faces without leaving any clear traces of tools or scaffolding. Share your thoughts in the comments below. When one looks away from the colossal statues, another astonishing feature becomes apparent: the unusual religious harmony that permeates the entire Dazu complex. This is one of the rare places where three major traditions, Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, do not conflict but instead intertwine, complementing one another in reliefs stretching hundreds of meters. On the same cliff, one may see the Buddha seated beside Laozi or Confucius, as if the ancient artisans wished to declare that all spiritual paths ultimately converge. This creates a profound layer of meaning. Dazu is not merely a religious space, but a philosophical center where moral values, teachings, and spiritual concepts are transmitted through visual art. Such interweaving is so rare that it challenges our understanding of religion in medieval China, where each belief system typically held its own domain within society. But the mystery does not end there. Several statues and reliefs display an unexpectedly precise understanding of human anatomy. Depictions of muscles, bones, and even internal structures appear in certain scenes with such accuracy that scholars wonder how the artisans acquired this level of knowledge. At that time, ear practices resembling modern anatomical study were virtually non-existent in Chinese culture, and if they did exist, no written record suggests such detailed comprehension. Some theories argue that these images are merely symbolic, representing spiritual states or deeper philosophical ideas. Yet even so, the anatomical precision surpasses expectations, raising another unresolved question. Did the creators of Dazu have access to medical knowledge now lost to history, or did they simply possess extraordinary observational skill? The deeper one ventures into the site, the more astonishing the preservation becomes. Sandstone, known for its vulnerability to erosion by water, wind, and temperature fluctuations, should have deteriorated rapidly. Yet thousands of statues at Dazu still retain sharp contours after more than 1,000 years. The folds of the garments remain soft and natural, the decorative patterns remain clear, and the deeply carved lines appear almost newly cut. This has led many to believe the ancient artisans applied a special surface treatment technique, perhaps a protective coating or a stone hardening method unknown to us. However, scientific examinations have not identified any definitive protective layer. This absence of evidence only intensifies suspicion that a lost technical tradition once existed here, now entirely erased from human memory. Beyond religious content, many reliefs vividly portray aspects of everyday life: agricultural work, craft production, legal principles, moral lessons, and even family etiquette. Yet some elements do not align perfectly with historical documents of the same period, and certain tools or clothing styles depicted in the carvings belong to eras much earlier, as though the artisans were recording memories of an even older cultural tradition. This raises a compelling question. Are the Dazu carvings purely products of the Tang Song periods, or do they continue a lineage of knowledge that originated in a far more ancient civilization now lost to time? The mystery deepens further with geological surveys revealing unusual cavities inside the cliff faces that host the carvings. Some experts believe tunnels or hidden chambers may once have existed, perhaps used during construction or for ritual purposes. Yet many of these passages are now sealed by later rock insertions, preventing deeper excavation. If a concealed network truly lies within the cliffs, then it would suggest that the ancient artisans planned their work with a level of architectural sophistication far beyond current assumptions. With all these layers of meaning, the true purpose of the Dazu rock carvings remains uncertain. Although regarded as a sacred site, many scenes convey not only religious teachings but also philosophy, cosmology, and moral instruction. Some scholars propose that Dazu might have served as a spiritual education center, with stone art functioning as a teaching medium for ethical and philosophical principles. In this interpretation, the cliffs are not merely natural walls but stone scriptures, an open-air academy created by a civilization determined to preserve wisdom in a material more enduring than paper or speech. Regardless of its original purpose, nothing is more striking than the seemingly impossible technique used to carve massive figures into steep cliff faces. Giant statues appear to defy gravity, intricate details resemble those produced by modern cutting tools, and the stone surfaces remain smooth with no visible tool marks, making Dazu one of Asia's greatest architectural enigmas. Each time sunlight brushes across the folds of stone garments or the serene expressions of the statues, observers glimpse not only the artisan's brilliance, but also the quiet secrecy of time itself, as though it still guards a forgotten truth we have yet to comprehend. Perhaps this silence is what makes the Dazu rock carving so profoundly humbling, not only as artistic masterpieces but as reminders that countless ancient techniques and bodies of knowledge have been lost, lying dormant in stone and waiting for humanity to understand them once more. The Alta rock carvings, located in northern Norway near the modern town of Alta, along the shores of Alta Fjord, represent one of the most extraordinary and enigmatic collections of prehistoric rock art in the world. Discovered in 1972 and later designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1985, the site contains more than 6,000 individual petroglyphs carved into smooth sandstone surfaces across several areas. Archaeologists estimate that these carvings were created over a remarkably long period, beginning around 5,000 to 7,000 years ago and continuing until roughly 2,000 years ago. This immense time span means that generation after generation of prehistoric people returned to the same rocky landscapes to carve new images beside older ones. Yet despite decades of research and excavation, many aspects of the altar carvings remain deeply mysterious, particularly the deliberate arrangement of the images and the symbolic meaning behind their placement, which continues to puzzle scientists and historians alike. At first glance, the altar carvings depict scenes that seem familiar and practical: hunters pursuing reindeer, fishermen casting lines into the water, boats filled with rowers moving across the sea, and animals such as elk, bears, whales, and birds. However, as archaeologists began carefully mapping the carvings during surveys conducted in the 1970s, 1980s, and later decades, a surprising pattern emerged. The images were not randomly scattered across the rock surfaces, as might be expected if they were simply casual decorations or isolated artistic expressions. Instead, many carvings appear to be arranged in complex groupings that suggest deliberate planning. For example, in several panels, researchers discovered multiple reindeer figures aligned in the same direction, sometimes accompanied by small human figures carrying bows or spears. The positioning of these animals often resembles the movement of a migrating herd, leading some scholars to propose that the carvings may represent organized hunting strategies or seasonal migration routes known to prehistoric communities. The scale of these compositions can be striking. In one well-known panel documented during archaeological surveys in the late 20th century, more than 20 individual reindeer figures appear within a single carved scene, arranged in a pattern that resembles a coordinated herd crossing a landscape. When compared with rock art sites elsewhere in Europe, such as the cave paintings of Lascaux in France or the petroglyphs of Valcamonica in Italy, the Alta scenes appear unusually narrative in character. Rather than isolated animals or symbolic figures, many Alta panels seem to depict complete events or sequences, almost like a prehistoric storyboard etched into stone. This has led some researchers to suggest that the carvings may have served as a form of visual storytelling or ritual communication, possibly connected to shamanistic beliefs or communal ceremonies. Even more intriguing is the way certain types of images consistently appear together. Boats, for instance, are frequently carved in clusters, sometimes forming what looks like a fleet of vessels travelling in the same direction. Some of these boats contain multiple human figures, each represented by simple lines indicating arms raised or paddles in motion. Archaeologists studying these scenes have noted that the arrangement of the figures sometimes mirrors ethnographic accounts of Arctic hunting expeditions recorded among later northern cultures. Yet there is still no consensus on whether these images depict real journeys, mythological stories, or symbolic rituals intended to influence hunting success. The possibility that the carvings held spiritual significance becomes even more compelling when examining the human figures engaged in unusual postures. In several panels, small human shapes appear with arms extended outward or raised above their heads, and sometimes surrounded by animals or geometric patterns. These figures are often interpreted as ritual performers or shamans, individuals believed in many ancient northern cultures to act as intermediaries between the human world and the spirit world. If this interpretation is correct, the placement of these figures among hunting scenes may suggest that the carvings were not merely records of daily life, but were instead part of ceremonies intended to ensure successful hunts or maintain harmony with the surrounding environment. Archaeological research has also revealed another remarkable clue about the placement of the carvings. When scientists began studying the geological history of the region, they discovered that the land around Alta has been gradually rising since the end of the last ice age due to a process known as isostatic rebound, in which the Earth's crust slowly lifts after the weight of massive glaciers disappears. As a result, the shoreline of Alta Fjord thousands of years ago was significantly higher than it is today. Many carvings that now appear high above sea level were originally located much closer to the ancient coastline. This observation has led researchers to believe that the artists intentionally selected rock surfaces near the water, where people travelling by boat or gathering along the shore would easily see the images. The placement may therefore have transformed the landscape itself into a kind of sacred ceremonial zone, where art, ritual, and daily subsistence activities merged. The mystery deepens when considering the sheer number of carvings created over time. More than 6,000 petroglyphs have been recorded, yet archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric communities in this region were relatively small and mobile, likely consisting of hunter-gatherer groups moving seasonally between inland hunting grounds and coastal fishing areas. The fact that these groups repeatedly returned to the same rocky surfaces for thousands of years indicates that Alta held a special cultural significance that endured across generations. In many cases, newer carvings were placed beside or even on top of older ones, creating layers of imagery that may represent evolving traditions or shifting symbolic meanings. Comparisons with other ancient rock art sites around the world further highlight the uniqueness of Alta's symbolic arrangement. For instance, the famous Bhimbetka cave paintings in India depict animals and humans in vivid scenes, yet the compositions there are typically confined to sheltered cave walls and do not appear to follow the same large-scale landscape planning visible in Alta. Similarly, the petroglyphs of Koso in California contain thousands of carvings, but many of them are isolated figures rather than complex narrative panels. In contrast, Alta's carvings often interact with one another across wide rock surfaces, suggesting a deliberate effort to organize images into meaningful visual relationships. Despite decades of study, however, the true meaning behind this arrangement remains elusive. Some scholars argue that the carvings functioned as a spiritual map of the landscape, marking places where important rituals occurred or where mythical events were believed to have taken place. Others suggest that the images may represent cosmological beliefs, with animals symbolizing different forces of nature or spirits, associated with the Arctic environment. A more practical interpretation proposes that the carvings served as teaching tools, helping younger members of the community learn hunting techniques, seasonal movements of animals, and the traditions of their ancestors. Yet none of these theories fully explains the complexity of the altar carvings. The careful placement of figures and repeated themes across centuries suggest a sophisticated belief system that researchers still cannot fully understand. Today, the rock surfaces still show reindeer, boats, and human figures frozen in stone, forming not only one of Northern Europe's largest collections of prehistoric rock art, but also a mystery that modern science has yet to decode. What do you think the mysterious arrangement of the altar rock carvings was really meant to represent? Ancient hunting maps, spiritual rituals, or messages from a forgotten belief system? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Royston cave carvings have long been regarded as one of the most enigmatic archaeological phenomena in England. A small underground chamber containing such an overwhelming amount of symbolic imagery that researchers are compelled to ask, to which religion, secret society, or long-lost culture did this place belong? The fact that the cave remained entirely buried beneath the ground until its accidental discovery in 1742 only added another dense layer of mystery surrounding it. There are no historical records, no traces of its excavators, and no explanations in any medieval document acknowledging its existence. It resembles a narrow opening into another dimension of the past, where cultural layers interweave and accumulate without leaving behind any clear origin. The carvings inside Royston Cave are unusually dense and crafted in a style unlike any known artistic tradition. In your opinion, why would ancient people deliberately create such a complex and unconventional symbolic system? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What makes Royston Cave especially remarkable is not its bell-shaped underground architecture, nor the theories linking it to secret societies such as the Knights Templar or clandestine monastic groups, but its dense system of carvings covering nearly every surface. This is the most crucial and most difficult to explain feature, the source of centuries of scholarly debate. Royston Cave does not appear to be a place simply decorated with a few religious symbols. Instead, it is a monumental encoded wall with dozens of figures, symbols, scenes, and characters carved so closely together that almost no empty space remains. This raises the fundamental question: what message were the creators trying to record? Was this a symbolic system designed for ritual guidance, or an encoded record of esoteric knowledge? A closer examination reveals something even more peculiar. The carving style inside the cave matches no known artistic tradition in England, whether medieval or pre-medieval. The figures appear both crude and deliberate, with distorted proportions yet purposeful composition. Some sections show refined craftsmanship, while others look roughly sketched by a different hand. Images of saints, kings, queens, St. George slaying the dragon, St. Catherine being tortured, and even pagan symbols all coexist in the tight space, interlaced without any recognizable traditional arrangement. This inconsistent mixture of styles and subjects raises the greatest question about Royston Cave. Was it created by multiple generations, or by a single group possessing an artistic approach that fell outside the flow of history? Scholars wonder why a site supposedly used for secret rituals would contain carving showing such varying levels of skill. If monks once lived here, could they have produced such a vast and complex network of carvings? If it were the work of a group like the Templars, why does the style not match any known Templar artistic patterns? One bold possibility remains. The creators drew from many sources, or perhaps from no known source at all. Another striking feature is the sheer density of carvings. The walls of Royston Cave contain almost no blank areas. The carvings form a continuous symbolic surface. This differs from typical ritual chambers, where religious imagery tends to follow an organized layout, but here everything appears compressed into the space. Scholars believe the carvers may have been attempting to store a large body of knowledge in a single confined place, perhaps fearing its loss. Others suggest this was a symbolic repository, used for secret rituals, requiring initiates to interpret the overlapping layers of meaning. Beyond their density, the carvings also possess a deeply anomalous character. Some figures gaze toward an unseen point. Others display unusual hand gestures not typical in Christian art. Certain symbols resemble pagan motifs, repeated circles, spirals, or runic-like markings that do not match any known writing system. This suggests the cave may have been used across multiple periods, with newer symbols carved over older ones, yet the wear patterns imply the carvings were created within the same general time frame, or at least using the same set of tools. The walls are unusually smooth, as if the cave had been used for rituals or occupation for a long period before the carvings were added. The smoothing does not resemble marks from modern metal tools, but looks more like stone scraping. This implies that the cave itself may predate the carvings by a significant margin, meaning the carvings form a secondary layer of information imposed on a far older space. If true, Royston Cave is not only an artistic mystery but also a structural mystery, a relic belonging to a time for which no written record exists. Another critical technical question arises: how were the carvings made in total darkness? To date, no evidence of oil lamps, torches, or any lighting tools has been found. There is no soot on the ceiling and no remains of light sources, yet the carvings require visibility, time, and meticulous effort. Some propose the use of mirrors to reflect external light, though this seems implausible given the cave's depth. Others suggest a soot-free flame, though this remains unproven. A more radical theory holds that the carvings were made before the cave became sealed, when its structure was much more open. Features such as the central support column and the curved walls do contribute to the cave's mystery, but they become secondary when compared to the astonishing system of carvings. These carvings are the core of the narrative, the silent language left behind by vanished hands. Every figure seems to pose a question. Why do the saints appear mournful? Why are the scenes arranged without religious order? Why are so many symbols non-Christian? Why does the style match no known form of medieval art? The bizarre artistic style, rough yet intricate, familiar yet alien, has led many scholars to suggest that the carvers possessed a unique esoteric system, a mode of thought external to traditional European artistic frameworks. The carvings may not have been designed to be beautiful, but to carry encoded messages according to a symbolic structure. Viewed symbolically, a Royston cave resembles a stone scripture, with each carving representing a concept, a layer of wisdom, or a ritual element. This explains the repetition of symbols, the similar yet asymmetric human poses, each possibly a variation of a core symbolic meaning. Despite centuries of study, no one has determined when the carvings were made. Where analysis is inconclusive, stylistic analysis cannot place them within any precise historical period. Even the popular theory linking Royston Cave to the Templars lacks concrete evidence. Everything remains a possibility rather than a fact, and that is precisely what makes Royston Cave a living mystery, a place where history seems to pause while the questions continue to multiply. Rising from the dry limestone hills of southeastern Anatolia, the monumental pillars of Gobekli Tepe represent one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries ever made. Dating back to roughly 9,600 to 8,200 BCE, the site is more than 11,000 years old, making it thousands of years older than famous monuments such as the pyramids of Great Pyramid of Giza or the stone circles of Stonehenge. Yet what truly perplexes researchers is not only the age of the site, but the extraordinary craftsmanship carved into its massive stone pillars. These carvings, executed with remarkable precision on enormous T-shaped monoliths, raise fundamental questions about the technological abilities of prehistoric societies that, according to conventional archaeological models, were still living as hunter-gatherers without metal tools, pottery, or permanent settlements. The pillars themselves are colossal. Many stand between 3 and 6 meters tall and weigh as much as 10 to 20 tons. They were quarried from nearby limestone bedrock using only stone tools, most likely flint picks and hammer stones. Despite such primitive equipment, the surfaces of these pillars were carefully smoothed and shaped into a distinctive T-form, creating towering monoliths that dominate circular stone enclosures. But it is the carvings covering these pillars that truly reveal a level of skill that seems almost anachronistic. Animals such as foxes, snakes, vultures, wild boars, cranes, and scorpions appear in striking relief across the stone surfaces. Many of these figures are carved in high relief, meaning the animals project outward from the pillar rather than simply being scratched into it. Achieving this effect requires the removal of large volumes of surrounding stone while preserving delicate raised details, an extremely demanding task even with modern tools. The precision of these carvings becomes even more remarkable when examined closely. Some relief lines are only a few millimeters deep, yet remain clean and sharply defined after more than 11 millennia of erosion. The animals display recognizable anatomical features: arched backs, elongated snouts, claws, and feathers, suggesting that the artist possessed both careful observation skills and highly controlled carving techniques. In certain examples, the bodies of animals curve gracefully around the edges of the pillars, indicating that the sculptors understood three-dimensional composition. Researchers who have studied the tool marks note that the surfaces appear to have been systematically pecked, scraped, and polished, likely through thousands of repetitive strikes with stone tools. Considering that limestone can still be relatively hard to shape with flint, the amount of labour required to produce even a single pillar carving would have been enormous. Archaeological excavations conducted at the site since the mid-1990s have revealed more than 20 circular enclosures, though only a small portion of the site has been uncovered so far. The major excavations began in 1994 under the direction of German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt of the German Archaeological Institute. Schmidt and his team discovered that the pillars were arranged in rings, often with two particularly massive central pillars standing opposite one another in the middle of each enclosure. These central pillars also feature carvings, including stylized arms and hands running down the sides of the stone, as well as belts and loincloths carved around the midsection. Such details strongly suggest that the pillars themselves may represent abstract human figures. If this interpretation is correct, the carvings are not merely decorative but symbolic, transforming the pillars into monumental stone beings, standing silently within ceremonial spaces. What makes the carving technology even more puzzling is the cultural context in which it appeared. According to conventional archaeological understanding, a large-scale stone carving and monumental architecture usually emerge after the development of agriculture, when societies have stable food supplies and specialized labor. However, Gobekli Tepe predates the widespread adoption of farming by several millennia. Radiocarbon dating of organic material from the site indicates construction beginning around 9600 BCE, long before domesticated crops became common in the region. This means that the builders were most likely still hunter-gatherers. The ability of such groups to organize the quarrying, transport, shaping, and carving of multi-ton pillars suggests a level of social coordination that archaeologists did not previously associate with pre-agricultural societies. Comparisons with later monuments highlight the extraordinary nature of the craftsmanship. For example, the earliest Egyptian stone reliefs, which appear thousands of years later during the Old Kingdom, were produced using copper tools and organised labour forces supported by agricultural states. Yet the animal carvings at Gobekli Tepe, created with nothing more than stone implements, often display similar clarity of form. In some cases, the relief animals seem almost alive, their bodies flowing along the pillar surfaces with a dynamic sense of movement. The famous Pillar 43, sometimes called the vulture stone, features a complex arrangement of birds, snakes, and abstract symbols that researchers continue to debate. Some scholars believe the imagery could represent mythological scenes, while others suggest astronomical symbolism connected to ancient star constellations. Another mystery concerns the order in which the carvings were made. It remains unclear whether the sculptors carved the animals while the pillars were still lying horizontally in the quarry, or after the pillars had already been erected in the enclosures. Carving before erection would require extremely careful planning to ensure that the orientation of the animals matched the final position of the pillar. Carving after erection would require working on vertical stone surfaces several meters above the ground, which would have been physically challenging without scaffolding. Both scenarios suggest advanced planning and engineering knowledge. Even more intriguing is the remarkable preservation of many carvings. Although exposed to thousands of years of weathering, several reliefs remain surprisingly well defined. This durability may be partly due to the relatively fine-grained limestone used at the site, but it also suggests that the carvers deliberately smoothed and finished the surfaces to minimize erosion. Some researchers propose that certain pillars may have been partially buried soon after construction, protecting the carvings for millennia until modern excavations uncovered them. The cumulative evidence from multiple excavation seasons, spanning the 1990s, 2000s and 2010s, continues to deepen the mystery of Gobekli Tepe's pillar carvings. Each newly uncovered enclosure reveals additional examples of animal reliefs, often with similar stylistic conventions, suggesting the existence of a shared artistic tradition. Yet the origins of that tradition remain unknown. Did a group of master stone carvers travel between communities spreading their techniques? Or did this knowledge develop locally through generations of experimentation long before the site itself was built? The pillar carvings of Gobekli Tepe challenged long-held ideas about early human societies. Their massive stone pillars and precise animal reliefs show that people more than 11,000 years ago possessed remarkable artistic and technical skills. Because only a small part of the site has been excavated, many more carved pillars may still remain buried, waiting to reveal new clues about this mysterious ancient culture. How do you think humans more than 11,000 years ago were able to carve such massive stone pillars with incredible precision? Was it simply the skill of hunter-gatherer communities, or could there have been an ancient knowledge or technology we still haven't discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below.